Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Nika Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Had Spirit Grimoire Quirk. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. You know, you don't have to be such an a-hole. The boys in the room go still at the comment. Izuku stiffens when he realizes he said that out loud and looks away from Bakugo like his life depends on it, and it would if the boy were any more murderous. What the F, did you just say to me? The question was rhetorical if the venom in his voice is any indication. His hands start to pop like firecrackers and Izuku is too busy trying not to swallow the lump in his throat. Say it again, you fucker. Izuku makes no notion that he heard him and continues to put his books and notebooks away, praying to some god that ignoring him for once would work in his favor. Bakugo practically lunges and grabs the last remaining notebook on the desk. The smell of burning paper and caramel floods the room. Don't you f***ing ignore me, you little sheet. He's starting to think that the god he prays to may be a god of misfortune. That or the devil. You're still writing these little hero notes, he says while flipping through it. When are you gonna get it through that brain of yours that you can't be a hero without a quirk? Bakugo dash. I don't wanna f***ing hear it. The snarl he sends Izuku's way is enough to make him flinch, mouth setting into a thin line. He sneers as he sets fire to the notebook, the pages turning black and filling the air with smoke. He throws it through a window, that leads to God knows where, and crouches so he's eye level with Izuku. Don't you backtalk to me again, you quirkless piece of shit. Try it again and it may be you instead of the notebook. Izuku doesn't say too much of anything. He doesn't even look Bakugo in the eye. He stares straight ahead looking at nothing in particular as he waits for something to come. Anything. Let's go, extras. The hag wants me at home early. They remain silent, watching, before shuffling out of the classroom with the blonde. The sound of the door shutting causes Izuku to release a breath he didn't know he had been holding. He sighs. Ironic that we used to call each other best friends. There it is. He nearly trips over himself running to grab the notebook. It landed in a koi pond to Izuku's dismay. The notes would surely be ruined. He didn't even know if he'd bother to copy it over. Maybe some of it was salvageable. He swatted away the koi that nibbled at the pages and picked it up gingerly as if the smallest touch could ruin it any further. He flipped through the pages and notes that most of the pages were smudged and faded, but readable to an extent. He'd take that. A win's a win, and he couldn't be too choosy these days. He placed it in the back of his bag and checked his watch. It was getting late and he had to be at the library soon. So with a heavy sigh of resignation, he made his way to the library. At least he felt at peace there. His mom made him start volunteering. It was never anywhere consistent. If they were hiring, or in need of help, she made sure that he was there. When he was younger, he didn't know why. To him, it felt like they were just going on field trips and doing odd things, but he had to admit he enjoyed them. Once he got older though, he realized that she did it because his social life took a nosedive after he was diagnosed as quirkless. It was pathetic, but he was thankful all the same. It got him out of the house and he always met interesting people and did something new, so he took it in stride. He found himself getting to know his community, a quiet little suburb he had taken for granted, and became familiar with the nooks and crannies of Mizutofu. He never got close enough to call some people a friend, but he was happy to just be known, without the reason why being his quirklessness. One such person was a girl named Haim. They often volunteered at the library together. He didn't know much about her, but she was nice. Once they got more acquainted, he realized she had a mouth like Bakugo's. He was still figuring out whether he liked that or not. Seeing her every Wednesday didn't exactly give him much of a choice though. You look like shit. He sighed. Is it that obvious? She snorted and he felt his face go warm with embarrassment. It's not my fault the people at school SCK. You could, you know, fight back? She said wryly. She placed a book on its shelf and turned to face him fully. Her shoulder-length blonde hair was pristine as always and her red eyes sparkled underneath her equally bright red glasses. Are you sure you're not related to anyone named Bakugo? The way you talk about him, God, I hope not. She picked up a few more books and went back to placing them on shelves. Mom never mentioned any family. Why? You want to get to know your future in-laws dash. I do not like him. Don't be embarrassed. Liking your bullies is a part of the gay experience. She snorted and nearly dropped all the books she was holding when Izuku lunged at her. I used to. There's a difference. He huffed. This is why I don't tell you anything. Fine, fine. Just help me put up these books. He complied but made sure to hit her with a book as payback. She huffed out a string of curses but didn't make any move to fight back. They chatted while they worked. It was never about anything specific. Good news, the weather, heroes, anything that popped in their head promptly became conversation while they moved all over the library reshelving books and giving help to anyone who needed it. It was peaceful and time passed quickly, as it usually did to Izuku's chagrin. The sun was setting outside and it was about time for them to wrap up. Luckily they only had one book left, so there wasn't much left to do anyway. "Hey, this last book doesn't have anything on it. Where should I put it?" he asked. The book itself was blue and was exceedingly plain. The only feature was the spine. It had gold swirls and intricate patterns that looked oddly familiar. "Ask Morimoto-san. She would probably know." Plus dash, she clicked her tongue and eyed him mischievously. "I'm going home and don't have time to help those who like to hit innocent girls like me." He rolled his eyes and huffed. "Innocent my butt, and of course you'd leave me to put everything back up. It's just the card, don't be so dramatic." "Whatever," he huffed. "See you next week." "Bye Izuku." He watched her leave the library before he set off to find Morimoto-san. She was the head librarian and pretty sweet. They were supposed to be just volunteers, but she always paid them or gave them gifts for their time. He was surprised he hadn't been offered a job yet. He got lost in his thoughts and accidentally bumped into someone before he could realize it. "Izuku. Good to see you." "Ah, Morimoto-san. It's good to see you too. Sorry for bumping into you." "It's fine. Did you need something?" "This book doesn't have any numbers or markings, so any idea what section it's supposed to be shelved in?" "Anything in it?" He opened it and expected to find maybe the title of the book or some other information, but it was completely blank. He flipped through to check and see, but it had nothing in it. Odd. No dash. "Well, then why don't you take it home? You always write journals and everything. You could use this?" "I guess, but it's a book? I feel like I would be wasting it. It's empty anyway. Can't do too much harm to it. Plus, I know you'll find some use for it. Spread some of your creativity." He shrugged. "If you say so?" He didn't have any idea what he would do with a blank book, but he'd use it if that's what he said she should do. "Good." She straightened her posture and smiled at him. "Now I'll be off. See you next week." Izuku stood there dumbfounded for a bit, debating whether to take it home as she suggested. He flipped through again, stuffed it hurriedly in his bag, and quickly finished his work so he could go home for the day. School ended without much fanfare, much to Izuku's surprise. Bakugo looked like he wanted to tear his head off with his teeth, but that wasn't anything new. He kept mumbling about how much of an idiot Izuku was and making dramatic gestures at him, but Izuku elected to ignore him out of self-preservation. He expected him to retaliate at the end of the day, but the most he did was shoulder check him, call him an idiot, and storm off like there was a fire somewhere. Izuku decided not to question and think maybe a god had finally answered his prayers and responded in kind. In hindsight, he'd get beat up by his lackeys later anyway. "Oh, don't forget the school trip is tomorrow. Be sure to come to school packed and ready," the class responded with a slightly dead, "Yes sensei." Izuku tried not to let his mouth hang open from shock. He desperately tried to remember any sort of trip and vaguely remembered something about Kyoto. He probably was out of it that day, so he hoped and prayed that his mom did not sign the consent forms. But it could be fun. Izuku let out a sigh and slumped in his chair. He was not winning this argument, but he would be dead if he didn't try. There's nothing in Kyoto except mountains and hills. How would that be any fun? You won't know until you try. Besides, middle school trips are always fun. Take pictures, make memories. You know, she waved her hands in the air, all that. "I don't want to," he pouted. He may be 14, but he was not against using whatever means necessary to plead with his mom. Even if it included pouting. "Is there any reason you don't want to?" She said it with this faux calm, and Izuku froze. He had been denying anything was wrong at school for months, and they had back and forths where she tried to coax it out of him. He refused to be homeschooled, that'd just make it even worse. "No. I'll go." She sighed. "Fine with me. Just text me if anything happens. I'll leave money on the table in the morning. Should be enough for souvenirs and anything else you impulse buy. I am choosing not to comment on your shade." She snorted. "Sure Izuku." She went back to the kitchen and started on dinner. With nothing to do, he returned to his room to work on his hero journals. He saw part of a villain fight on the way to school and couldn't note anything because he left them all at home fearing Bakugo might burn another one of them. His memory was near perfect thankfully, so he remembered most of what he saw. He took the journal off his bookshelf and began jotting down notes on Kamui Wood's quirk. The villain was a gigantification type, and it was interesting to see how he handled it, or rather tried, until MT Lady showed up. He seemed to overexert himself by trying to capture him. Probably due to the sheer surface area of his body. He managed to use his wood as constructs offensively enough to wear him down and use lacquered chain prison, but his wood was noticeably thinner, so His mumbling came to a halt when he heard something from the shelf fall. A glance revealed it was the blue book from the library the other day. He started to place it back on the shelf, but he, oddly, placed it right on his desk and stared at it. He found himself opening it and expected to see a blank page like he did yesterday, but instead was greeted with what looked vaguely like a poem. Every home has a heart. It is not always beating, but it is there. It holds tales. Memories. Filled with what has been and waiting to be filled with what has not. The expanse tells a story. Perhaps, not yet of death, but always of birth. Always of its origins. Where is the heart where you reside? He could have sworn the poem, he wasn't really sure what to call it, wasn't there yesterday. For the second time today, he felt like his brain was short-circuiting. He closed his eyes and breathed, and reread it. It still didn't make much sense. But this was completely blank yesterday? He flipped through the pages over and over again, almost frantically. The rest of the pages remained suspiciously blank, so he wasn't completely losing his mind, but it didn't help that. The first page was filled when it clearly wasn't yesterday. Literature wasn't his strong suit, and whatever he read was confusing. It seemed to have a meaning, maybe some sort of message? But he had no idea what it could mean and where he would even start with something as vague or literal as a heart. He researched the poem to see if he could find anything on it, but as far as he could tell no one had ever heard of the poem. He then tried to find out the symbolism of the heart they mentioned but turned up empty again. He stared at it. Then stared some more before chucking it on his bed before his headache got any worse and went back to his journals. Looking at it wouldn't do him any favors. Probably doesn't mean much anyway. Some part of him denied that notion, but he chalked it up to him being overly curious instead of logical at the best of times. When he finished his analysis, he begrudgingly started to pack. He had nothing else to distract himself with, and ignoring it would probably lead him to forget, and he did not want to show up to school without anything to wear. It was probably only a weekend, so he packed a few spare outfits and a few games in case he got bored. He hoped no one would destroy them, but knowing his luck, they probably wouldn't come back home with him. A soft knock interrupted his cynicism and he mumbled a soft, "Come in," before his mother peeked in to check his progress. "Are you ready?" "I think so. If I forget anything I can just buy it on the trip," he sighed. "We're not rich, you know. Dad sends us 10 million yen a month." His mom flushed red and sputtered. "We have to budget Izuku. And you can't just spend all your money. You have to save it dash." He rolled his eyes at her rant and chuckled. "Whatever, Mom. Why do you even work anymore?" She shrugged and looked anywhere but him. "It gives me something to do. You're not exactly small anymore." She looked at him again. "Well, you are small but dash." "Mom. Fine. Just make sure to get some sleep." She paused and looked hesitant. "Do you need anything to help you sleep?" "No, I don't think I'll need it tonight. Thanks, Mom." She nodded and walked over to him. She pecked him on the cheek before saying a soft "I love you" and leaving the room. Izuku, done packing, switched into his nightclothes and went to sleep. Izuku Midoriya? Present. A few kids stared at him. He hurriedly popped in his earbuds to drown out the inevitable comments and insults that the other kids would say and tried not to look too pathetic. Some time passed as the teacher finished calling out roll, most of which he spent looking off in the distance. He cursed when he saw students rearranging themselves, not hearing whatever was said with his earbuds in. He took out his earbuds and whipped his head around, trying to make sense of what was happening before he felt a sharp poke in his side. "Midoriya." He turned around to face whoever was calling his name. "Ah, Kimura. Mind telling me what's going on?" She smiled at him mischievously. Her blue eyes were glinting, barely hidden by her bangs, and her equally bright blue hair whipped around in the early morning wind. "You could just call me Tsukiko, you know. No need to be so formal, but to answer your questions we have a buddy system. And she poked him again and let out another breathy laugh, "mine. Could say the same to you. You still call me Midoriya. Only because you won't let me call you Aizu. You still could just use my first name." She clapped her hands together and smiled up at him again. "I'm an all-or-nothing girl, I'm afraid." They boarded the bus not long after that. They sat at the very back and didn't talk much, but it wasn't awkward. Izuku would say it was comfortable even. He didn't talk to Tsukiko much. She had a quirk, telekinesis like his mother, but it wasn't very strong, so everyone pretty much ignored her. They weren't unkind but didn't give her so much as a passing glance on a good day. He found a sort of kindred spirit in her after she nursed a few of his wounds after routine run-ins with Bakugo and his crew. She never stepped in to help, but he could never blame her for that. These kids were ruthless and he wouldn't wish it on anyone else. At least she tried to help, he reasoned. It was better than nothing. They talked here and there and ate lunch together sometimes. She was quiet and kind and often indulged in his rants about quirks and heroes. He was thankful for having one less person out to get him at this school and would even say she's a friend or close to it at least. One of these days he'd have to ask her to hang out outside of school. Hey Izu. I'm gonna head to sleep. Wake me up when we're there, yeah? He nodded and she pulled out a blanket and started to drift off. And if she saw him drift off too, she didn't mention it. The first day wasn't much. They arrived in the dead of night and headed to their hotel. They were paired up with someone of the same gender for the sake of rooming, and thankfully Izuku got paired with one of the more relaxed members of his class. He treated Izuku like he wasn't there, but hey, it was better than being yelled at. The next day they all woke up and traveled around exploring some of the monuments and sites. He made sure to bring his backpack full with his wallet and notebooks. He took to learning about the history with a sort of vigor that made the other kids look at him like he was crazy and call him a nerd. He wrote notes on the history and all of the shrines they interacted with. Tsukiko teased him, but it was friendly, so he continued, albeit a bit embarrassed. Kyoto was the oldest city in Japan. The city was decorated in shrines and older architecture that signified its age, but it was the graceful sort of old that was timeless. The shrines were mesmerizing, and the parks and gardens were beautiful. You could tell the city was loved. With Kyoto being one of the longest-standing cities and biggest, it's often referred to as the heart of Japan. Izuku paused at his teacher's words. He turned over the phrase, heart of Japan, in his head, wondering where he heard it before. It felt like it was on the tip of his tongue, but he couldn't quite place it. Hello? Izu, are you there? Tsukiko waved a hand in his face and Izuku felt his cheeks run warm at the sudden attention. I am fine, Kimura. I mean Tsukiko. It's no problem. You zoned out a bit and looked like All Might when he doesn't know how to answer an interview question. It was then that reality fell back into place for him. He noticed that most of the students were gone and only a few remained milling about in groups. He thanked the heavens Bakugo had decided to go somewhere else and he didn't have to watch his back. Right. So what's happening? Oh my god, you really get lost in those notebooks of yours, don't you? Izuku knew she didn't mean any harm but couldn't help the flinch that came over him. I didn't mean to offend you. Sorry. I tend to run my mouth without thinking. Anyways, Teach wants us to go and explore on our own, but keep our buddies with us. I was asking if there's anywhere you wanted to go. Izuku was unfamiliar with the city, so he could only shrug at the question. Had he remembered the trip, he probably would have looked up things to do, but the most he was able to do was Google a few pictures so he knew what he was getting into. Lead the way. Gladly. With that, they were off. She led them to a few more shrines. Izuku was enamored with how old yet elegant they looked. Tsukiko, on the other hand, mainly used them for photo ops that Izuku was forced to be a photographer of. Oh my god, USCK at taking pictures. His face blushed violently at the insult. It's not like I'm a professional, you know. She rolled her eyes and huffed. Trust me. I can definitely tell, she said. She swiped through a few more of the photos and inspected them like a detective. Okay, so these pictures are a definite no, but let's try a selfie. She said it with sadistic glee, and Izuku felt panicked because if she thought him taking photos were bad, then she would think him in them were terrible. He threw his hands up in refusal, but he was practically dragged towards her. Oh my god. Did you just use your quirk on me? Yeah, whatever, but that's not important right now. We're taking a selfie, remember, she declared, her face a mask of seriousness. Now say cheese. And before he could even try to pose, the flash went off and he was positive he made some sort of weird face. His suspicions were confirmed when her laugh rang out above the voice of the other tourists. Oh my god, you look terrible. You really never take pictures, do you? He held his head in his face and sighed. All my friends really do SCK, he said. His voice was slightly muffled by his hands and he didn't expect her to hear, but the gasp she let out signaled she did. No, I didn't mean dash. Oh my god, you consider me a friend? He swore her eyes had stars in them and the most he could do was let out a nervous squeak in response. Only if you want, he stammered. He felt so warm he was sure smoke was coming out of his ears. Yes. I didn't think it was mutual, so I never said anything. We never hang out. I've had so many ideas dash. Tsukiko, he said calmly. She looked at him with wide eyes and he really thought he'd never be the one saying this. Breathe. Right, she breathed out. She pulled her phone out of her pocket and showed him a website with different tourist spots. So what should we do first? How about we keep shopping before we have to go back, he asked. She nodded and silently, they started their trek through the streets of Kyoto. By the way, do you really say, oh my god, that much? His response was in the form of a very skillful punch to his side. Afterward, they visited all the local stores they could find. Their time was mostly spent weaving through sweets shops and tasting anything remotely edible. She practically salivated at anything sweet and he didn't have the heart to say no, so most of his trip money was spent on the stuff. They also spent a great deal of time shopping for souvenirs and keepsakes. He ended up buying a Torii Gate charm and was currently shopping for something for his mom. Tsukiko, on the other hand. Isn't this one so cute? She dangled a small keychain with a white kitsune mask and, for the second time today, he swore he could see stars in her eyes. You've bought 12 souvenirs already, not to mention all the sweets dash. Don't be a worrywart. It's just a little money. You've spent 20,000 yen. Well, I am rich, she said. Her tone was filled with confidence and she acted like that answered everything. He let out an exasperated sigh and went back to his own shopping. They continued to browse all the charms and keychains the small store had. He stopped trying to keep her from spending obscene amounts of money. They exited the store after he dragged her out before she could be haggled into buying anything else. It had gotten dark out before they knew it, the sky turning a familiar shade of bluish-black. So where to now? She asked. I kind of want to visit one of the museums we passed a while back. I want to go to the mochi shop they have. She paused and looked deep in thought, her face of serious concentration. We only have about an hour left, so why don't we meet back here in 40 minutes? So we can head to the hotel together. Sounds good to me. They departed with a wave and Izuku trusted his memory to trace the way back they came. He walked aimlessly for a while, stumbling in and out of shops before he realized that he was hopelessly lost. He tried looking for a map or some sort of sign to point him back in the right direction but only ended up wandering further to some deserted street he knew he definitely hadn't seen before. This sheet is so effing annoying. Why the F did we come to some old but city? The familiar crackle of explosions made Izuku freeze. That voice undoubtedly belonged to Bakugo's. Frantic, he ducked behind the shadows of an unused building and hid, cursing his luck for what felt like the 1,000th time this week. I could have been at home training or something. Why did I even come? He accented his sentence with a snarl and kicked at a pole that startled Izuku. He tripped and fell right into some boxes behind him, managing to knock something over in the process. He let out a silent F- and hoped that Bakugo had decided to ignore it. He did not. Who's there? He said. His tone had an edge to it that sent shivers up Izuku's spine. He let out another round of tiny explosions and snarled, but did nothing else. Silence hung in the air and Izuku let out a sigh of relief. He lost him. So he thought. Bakugo jumped out before him and he sneered. I had a feeling it was you, Deku. Always hiding like the weakling you are. Izuku, with his ounce of self-preservation, scrambled and booked it out of the alley. He had no idea where he was going, but he didn't want to be on the receiving end of Bakugo's boredom. Hey! Get back here, you little sheet. Yeah. Definitely didn't want to be on the other. Energo sent swift punches at them, aided by the use of his explosions, and rendered them useless just as fast. Quirk use is illegal, you know. Oh, and who's gonna tell? By the time I get my hands on you, your lips will be swollen shut, you freak. The pure venom in his voice had Izuku panicking even more, so he pushed himself to go even faster to outrun him. He knew he managed to get a little further ahead when Bakugo cursed at him for cheating. Adrenaline is one hell of a drag. He exited another alley, not willing to try his luck again with the box maneuver, so he ran into one of the bigger local stores and hid behind one of the aisles and hoped Bakugo wouldn't be able to see him. Deku! I know you're FING in here. Stop hiding from me. He poked his head out from behind the aisle and watched Bakugo survey the store and grumble out another string of curses. He slowly made his way through each aisle and was approaching Izuku quickly. He looked at the aisle he was on and saw GG gifts and cheap disguises. He threw them on in haste, a cowboy hat covering his green hair and a pair of shades and a fake mustache for dramatic effect. He stood up and slowly made his way to the exit, not wanting to look too suspicious that Bakugo would catch on. He nearly made it to the finish line before the voice of the shopkeeper rang out. Sir, you have to pay for that. Izuku held his hands up and started rambling about how he'd pay for it before he realized Bakugo might overhear. He glanced over at him and noticed Bakugo narrowing his eyes at him in anger, expression shifting to something slightly feral. Deku! Izuku threw off the disguise and bolted out. He let his legs take him anywhere and ran through streets and shops again without any regard for the destruction he left in his wake. He eventually slowed to a stop, his body finally catching up with him as his adrenaline rush faded. He was reduced to a panting mess and had to lean on a wall for support just to stand up. When he didn't hear the telltale sound of an explosion or Bakugo's yelling, he managed to finally relax and took the chance to survey his surroundings. He was at a shrine. It was huge and he found himself looking up at it to take all of it in. It was a beautiful blend of red and green and looked almost tiered. He ventured further in and found himself drawn to how beautiful everything was, the garden, plants, everything. He wandered about aimlessly before he stumbled upon a nameplate. Kamigami Jinja Shrine. One of the oldest shrines in Japan. Originally icted in XXX, the shrine has stood for centuries as a sign of the craftsmanship and dedication of early citizens of Kyoto. It has often served as a symbol of the heart, not only of Kyoto but Japan as well, the origin point of all shrines in Kyoto and a testament to the memories of Japan's roots. He finished reading the nameplate and the history of the place he stood in settled into him. He found himself under a familiar sense of déjà vu at the words. He observed the nameplate again and analyzed it as a detective would. Heart, he said faintly. It was then that he thought of that book. The one from yesterday that had that poem that stumped him. It was then that it clicked, the heart it mentioned, and understanding washed over him like a wave. He wasn't sure how he knew, but it felt instinctive almost. Like something he had done before. He rushed to get the book out of his bag, and it was then that he noticed a faint light illuminating the shrine. He looked around to try and find the source of it until he realized it emanated from him. More specifically, something on him. He pulled his bag off his back and stared at it, partly in disbelief but also in wonder. He opened it slowly, a strange sense of foreboding overcoming him as he did so. It revealed the book he found at the library the other day. The plain blue book was turned gold and it was bathed in white light. It was almost like the sun, so bright it was dangerous but mesmerizing in the way you couldn't help but look. He pulled it out, shrugging off the yellow All Might backpack, and held it. It was light but felt heavy in the way secrets did. He found himself drugged by the anticipation of what could be causing it. He had no idea what could be inside it, or what could be the source of the strange light, but he felt himself opening the bag despite that. The questions and concerns over it drowned out by the force that guided his hand into his bag to grab the book that glowed. He stared at it and his mind was flooded with those same questions. Why was the book glowing? What did the poem mean? Was it connected to the shrine, and if so, how? He exhaled shakily and chuckled a bit. He couldn't help the breathless wow that escaped when he gazed upon it. His hand moved, autonomous from the rest of his body, and turned to the first page. And in it, he found 3 words, black against the light that burned so brightly. You found it. And suddenly, the book transformed. Words swirled in his eyes like a kaleidoscope, dancing around in front of his irises like wayward stars. The pages flipped around, as if compelled by some wind it could only fill, and behaved wildly. Anything he tried to make out disappeared into the book or flitted out of his sight before he could make sense of what it was. The light was no longer white but a rainbow, filled with a spectrum of colors that he shouldn't be able to see. And had he been able to see himself at that moment, he would have seen that same color, mirrored, in his own eyes. The book flew into the air, escaping his grasp as if it had a will of its own, and vibrated. Thrumming with energy and things he couldn't understand. It grew brighter in the night light, its light rivaling that of the sun itself. It was bright. It was beautiful. And then it was gone. He woke up to the sound of knocking. He groaned and rubbed his eyes, trying to get rid of the grogginess and get up. He opened his eyes and surveyed his surroundings, finding himself in his hotel room. How did I get back here? The last thing he remembered was Bakugo chasing him and then seeking shelter in a shrine. He tried to concentrate and remember what happened after that to get him back here, but was interrupted by the sound of his door opening. The door opened to reveal his roommate, Makino, looking murderously at Izuku. Hey, the teacher told me to come to get you. We're having breakfast then leaving, he said. The sentence was simple. Easy to understand and clear as day. Yet he found himself unable to process it, or anything for that matter, because of the woman behind him. She was wearing a white kimono. Her skin was a similar shade of white, somewhere between pale and ethereal, and had jet black hair that touched the floor. She had this sly smile, partially hidden behind her long nails that were extremely sharp. He would have written her off as another resident of the hotel just passing by, but she was staring directly at him. His attention was brought back to his roommate when he shifted, looking very uncomfortable. Is there something on my face? He asked. No. Izuku paused and rubbed his eyes again. Why is that woman behind you? His roommate looked behind him, and looked directly at the woman, but turned back to Izuku, his face a mask of confusion. The woman, on the other hand, preened and pointed at herself, mouthing something he didn't want to try and understand. There's no one behind me. Are you okay? He tilted his head as he asked, voice full of concern, and Izuku would have taken note of that if not for the fact he felt like he was going insane. You can't see her? This time, he fully turned around and peered into the hall, coming face to face with the woman. He looked left and right before stepping back into the room and turning his attention to Izuku. There's no one here, Midoriya. Are you sure you're fine? He asked, unsure. But you looked directly at her. Midoriya, do you want me to get a teacher? You're seeing things. But she's right there. His roommate sighed. This time he went to step into the hall and Izuku would have cheered if not for the fact he passed directly through her like she wasn't even there. The woman laughed at him and Izuku couldn't help the way his mouth fell open in shock. What was going on? His roommate stepped back into the room and looked at him pitifully. Midoriya, I'm going to tell the teacher that you're feeling sick. Get some rest. Okay? He closed the door before Izuku could even respond. He put his head in his hands and chanted to himself, I'm not going crazy. I'm not going crazy. I'm not dash. Hello. He snapped his head up so fast he was sure he was going to have whiplash later. In front of him stood the woman he was just having a mental breakdown about. He could do nothing but gape at her, body too still with shock to say anything. She giggled at him and smiled. You're a funny one, you know that? Her voice was almost musical. Deep and warm, beautiful just like she was. He was still too stunned to say anything, so he did the most intelligible thing he could, nod. She laughed at him again, but continued, I'm a spirit you know. They can't see me. A spirit? He asked, stupefied. She put her hand on her chin and looked up in thought. I think another name for them was yokai? But yokai aren't real. Well, I'm very real, aren't I? She said while smiling. It was sly and exposed her teeth that looked too sharp to be human. She reached out with one of her fingers, her long and sharp nails grazing Izuku by the cheek. He felt something hot run down his face and looked down to see blood dripping from where her nail had just cut him. What sort of spirit are you? He asked, voice mixed with both awe and fear. I believe you call us Yukiana. Wait, he said, sitting up and fully staring. You're the spirit that lures men in and kills them? She shrugged. Centuries ago, we used to, she said, voice full of nonchalance like she was talking about the weather. He stared at her with a bewildered look in his eyes and she sighed. You're a magician. Shouldn't you know this? A what? Her nose wrinkled. You reek of M-. A knock at the door cut her off mid-sentence. And before he could ask what she was about to say, she vanished. He stared dumbly at where she had just been before a knock rang out again. Coming, he called. He stumbled over to the door and opened it, revealing Tsukiko, with no spirits, thankfully, looking at him with the same murderous venom his roommate had. Why was everyone mad at him today? Where were you? We were supposed to meet up by the sweets shop and you ditched me. She pushed past him and fell back on his bed, crossing her arms. You could have at least called and said you were going back to the hotel. What? She sat up and stared at him. Everyone met up outside the hotel and I had to go back without you. The teacher asked me where you were and almost called the police when you wouldn't answer your phone. She stood up and walked up to him, jabbing a finger at his chest. Come to find out, you were in your room sleeping. I almost had a heart attack, she groaned. Where were you? I don't remember, he said. Which wasn't a total lie. He really didn't remember what happened after Bakugo chased him. He sweat dropped when he saw that she was giving him the same murderous look from before. What do you mean you don't remember? She yelled. Okay, wow, I really F'd up. He brought her over to the bed and explained what had happened last night. At least, what he could remember. He, to his dismay, left in the part about Bakugo chasing him and how he had fled into one of the shrines he could find. He told her how he remembered exploring the shrine but everything else is fuzzy after that. She didn't say anything afterward but continued to look deep in thought. They sat in relative silence and he prayed that she would accept his story because he was telling the truth. You know, she said, finally breaking the silence. She looked at him and said, I've been practicing with my quirk. I could kill him for you, voice perfectly calm and serious. First of all, no. Second of all, how have you been practicing your quirk? Why not, she whined. I could clean up the body and everything without anyone . No. You're no fun. But I started practicing a while back. I figured it was like an arm and started lifting weights with it, she said shrugging. Izuku's mind went wild with so many questions about her quirk and how she trained it. He had never asked out of politeness because people tended to find his questions invasive to say the least, but now they were friends. And it's been forever since he journaled a quirk, and his hand was practically itching to write something. Wait, let me grab my journals. I want to hear all about it, he beamed. Had he been paying attention, he would have noticed the look of alarm on her face from the torrent of questions she was about to face, but instead, he remained blissfully unaware as he made his way over to his bag. He opened and sorted through it, trying to find his journal. Got it, he said, but instead he pulled out a book. At first, he was confused, but upon further inspection he realized it was the book from the library, only it looked different. The book was still blue but the corners were slightly lifted and colored gold. Drawings of flowers and vines were etched into the cover and connected the corners, forming the outer edge of the front cover. In the very center was a small four-pointed star, filled with gold. He stared at it for what must be a long time because Tsukiko called his name and he mumbled, I'm fine, and continued to stare at it. He felt at the grooves and the smooth touch of it, slightly in wonder of how intricate it is, and wondered how it had changed, again. He opened it, his instinct moving faster than his mind can process, and memories from yesterday flooded him. How he went to the shrine and discovered its connection to the book, how it started to glow and the words danced across his vision, and how it levitated in the air like a star before he blacked out. "Izuku, are you okay?" She said it with so much worry that reality slotted back into place for Izuku, lifting the fog over his mind. He blinked and realized that he was no longer staring at the book he was just holding, but rather the ceiling, and that his head had an ache that wasn't there before. "Are you okay? You blacked out for a moment and wouldn't respond to anything I said." He looked at her and nodded, still groggy from whatever that was. She helped him sit up and they sat until he finally felt good enough to get up and make his way back to the bed. "What happened?" she asked, voice full of concern. "I'm not sure." She looked at him with even more worry than before but just sighs. "Well, it's almost time for us to board the bus. You can nap there." "Okay." He nodded and with her help, packed up his things. It took them some time, but they managed to get it done before it was time to go and made their way to the bus. He would have to investigate later. Getting home is like a breath of fresh air. The events of this make Izuku feel stilted. He wasn't quite sure what happened, but now that he's home he can think and reflect. Something he hasn't had time for since he went on the trip. The trip home was unnerving. He saw just as many spirits as he did people in his class and he nearly passed out. They all kept staring at him too. It was like coming face to face with a Ghibli movie. He kept muttering to himself, "I'm not crazy." Which got him looks from just not the spirits, but people in his class too. Great. When boarding the bus, he tries his best to avoid them and pretend they aren't there. Surely he was imagining it. However, when trying to walk through one of them he bumps into it and falls. Everyone laughs at him because to them, it looks like he tripped on nothing but there was a giant frog in front of him. The frog even turned his head at him and it took everything in him not to scream, so he just swallowed it down. He tries to nap but all he can do is stare at the scene in front of him and try not to go insane. He laughs a bit, slightly hysterical at everything that happened. He was seeing spirits. He knew it wasn't some dream when the Yukiana cut him, he still had the scar to prove it. So, him being the logical person he is, decides that yes, this is very much real, but he doesn't know why it's all happening to him. As soon as he got home, he collapsed on his bed. There was also the issue of the book. He's been too scared to open it since he's been home and has been sort of just staring at it since he got home. His mom peeked into his room earlier and looked worried, but he couldn't explain what was going on and just said he was tired and hoped she would leave him alone for the time being. "Guess there's no point in staring at it," he sighs. He grabs it and takes it in again. He traces the vines and flowers on the cover, curiosity and admiration mixing before he opens it, bracing himself for some sort of pain to befall him since that seems to be a trend, but nothing happens. He looks at it and waits for something, anything to happen. Suddenly, the book flashes, and Izuku closes his eyes, throwing it across the room like a bomb. He hears the pages flap and squints, too afraid to open his eyes at whatever is happening. When he doesn't see anything, he fully opens them and looks at it before something flies in his face and he swats at it. "Ow! You don't have to be so rude, you know." He scans the room, trying to find the source of the voice, and does a double take when he sees what looks like a fairy fluttering a few feet away from him. "What? Oh." The fairy perks up and flies over to him, smiling brightly. "My name is Sylvie. Guardian of the Grimoire at your service," she says and bows. That sentence is too loaded for him to tackle at once, so stupidly, he asks, "Are you a spirit too?" The fairy's face becomes a mask of confusion before she looks at him and asks, "You've already met one?" He nods and the fairy looks disappointed, but it doesn't last long because she's back to smiling stupidly like All Might in record time. "Okay. That's probably for the best. Rip the band-aid off all at once. You do have a lot of magic so it makes sense." "Wait? Magic? Well yeah, you're a magician," she says, looking at him like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Magic doesn't exist." "Wait, I forgot magicians don't exist in your world anymore." "Anymore dash. Well I'm mainly guessing, but magic was dying by the time I was sealed in the book." Izuku isn't sure what to say to the information he's receiving, so he just stares and lets her ramble on. "Okay so, short version. There used to be a time where humans had magic and spirits walked the earth, etc., but then technology happened and people stopped using it." Okay, he had a lot of questions and this was a lot to digest, but he couldn't exactly think of anything intelligible to say since he felt like his brain was short-circuiting with everything that was happening. "But we don't have magic. We have quirks." "Quirks?" she asks confusedly. So he tells her about how people are born with abilities that are unique to them and they have heroes to protect the peace. Pretty standard stuff by his definition, but now she's looking at him with a look of confusion and questions in her eyes. So you all have superpowers, she says, more of a statement than a question. Yes. This sounds a lot like magic dash. Well, it isn't. Okay, I get that. Just, wow, but anyway you have magic. But it doesn't exist. She smiles, mischievously, and looks at him. Why don't we test that? Izuku had taken them to Dagoba Beach. It was nighttime, so they didn't see anyone on their trip. She specifically requested an area where people didn't frequent, and not many people came here since it became a trash dump unless they had a reason to. And, apparently, Izuku's was magic. So with a book in tow, and a spirit flying beside him, he stood in the sand between mounds of trash and sort of stared, unsure of what to do. So, why don't we open the book and start? She asked. He grabbed the book and opened it, wincing as he expected something to happen to him, but thankfully, nothing did. He was finally able to read it like a normal book and noticed the first page. Chapter 1, The Fundamentals. History. Familiars. Basic spells. Restricted. The sections had pages next to them, and per Sylvie's instructions, he skipped to the basic spells page. The first thing he noticed was the illustration in the center of the page. It looked like a mess of squiggles and lines, in differing colors. Underneath it was a text in red, that looked an awful lot like Latin and a paragraph that looked like a description. Levis. This spell manipulates gravity itself to the user's will. Any object this spell is used on will levitate high and far and be under the caster's full control. Okay, so this is a levitation spell. It's simple and a lot of beginner magicians cast this as their first spell. He pointed at the illustration in the center of the page. What's this? It's a guide on how to cast it with a wand. You have to trace it out like that to cast it. We don't have a wand, so you'll have to use your body. I doubt you'd want to carry one around in this age anyway. My body. Wands are like conductors to magic. You channel your magic through it and it makes casting a lot easier. We don't have that luxury, so you'll have to use different parts of your body depending on the spell. It's harder but you can do it, she said, reassuring him. He nodded and stared at the page with renewed vigor. He could do this, even though he couldn't believe that he was. Just say the name of the spell out loud. Visualize it and it'll be fine. Use your hands for this one. He turned over the spell name in his mind. He stared at the mounds of trash, illuminated by the moonlight, and breathed. He closed his eyes and pictured the lone washing machine floating above the sand and chanted. Levis. He felt a thrumming dance across his body, like a form of electricity running through him. He opened his eyes and stared. Across from him, the washing machine floated in the air, and Izuku couldn't help but stare dumbly and revel in the fact that it worked. You did it. Maybe a little too well though. He turned to look at her and saw what she was talking about. Not only did the washing machine float but all the trash did. Izuku went wide-eyed at the sight. Had he done this? Wow. That worked, he said, voice full of surprise. How do I stop it? Just picture it going back to its original state, and the rest will follow. He closed his eyes and did just as she instructed. He knew it had worked when he heard the sound of the trash falling on the sand, groaning from the impact. He opened his eyes and stared. She turned to look at him and gave him that winning grin of hers. You did it. You cast your first spell. He probably looked stupid but smiled anyway. Quirkless had defined him for so long, and now it didn't. He could finally do something with himself. Even if it wasn't being a hero. He didn't have to be ashamed anymore. Now, she said, smile more mischievous than before. Why don't we try a few more? The next few weeks were odd but a welcome change of pace. School, thankfully, faded into the background, so now Izuku was given time to adjust to his new companion and abilities. He got to know Sylvie a bit more. She helped him learn about magic and how to use it and was helpful when she could be. It was awkward at first, but something about it all felt nostalgic. He fell into a rhythm that felt familiar but wasn't sure why. They started to playfully jab at each other much like he did with his other friends. He wasn't sure how to treat her as a mentor, which she was supposed to be, so he settled for a friend and left it at that. The magic thing was weird, to say the least. He was a bit hesitant at first. It felt surreal to be able to know magic was real and much more to be able to use it. Sylvie eased him into it with practice here and there and didn't push. There was also the whole seeing spirit things. Seeing this was still odd. He felt like he had walked into a Ghibli movie whenever he set foot into a room. He swore he saw a cat bus one day on his way to school that he was half tempted to ride. They weren't very common, but he saw them often enough he had to fight the urge to slap himself. They were staring more frequently now. He still pretended that he didn't see them, which drove them away most of the time, but some watched him with doubt whenever he squeezed by them, trying his best not to touch them. He was hesitant to make contact because that wasn't exactly a can of worms he was ready to open. Hello. Still dealing with the magic thing, but it seemed like it was going to open itself soon, so he resolved himself to give that problem to future Izuku. Sylvie seemed oddly resigned when talking about other spirits and claimed to have no answers as to how they existed. He didn't buy it completely, her eyes told a different story, but didn't press it. Overall, his life was now a hodgepodge of Japanese fantasy movies. Fun. The ringing of the school bell brought him back to the present. He zoned out the latter half of the day and prayed he didn't miss anything important. He hurriedly grabbed his books and bag. Bakugo didn't look exactly friendly today, and he hadn't exactly learned how to fight back, so he settled to run wherever life prompted. Once he made it a safe distance away from the school gates, he sighed. He found himself at a small park near his apartment, so he stopped to take a break. He pulled some water out of his back but nearly spilled it when Sylvie poofed into existence. "Oh my god, you can't scare me like that," he said, chiding. He grabbed a towel out of his bag he kept in case of emergencies and wiped the water off his clothes, hoping he didn't look too embarrassing. "Sorry." She looked at him sheepishly and smiled. He rolled his eyes but continued to listen. "I think we should go somewhere today." He raised an eyebrow at this, surprised. There's someone I want you to meet." She didn't say anything else and Izuku huffed. "Who?" "It's a surprise," she said. She smiled a bit mischievously and Izuku rolled his eyes again. He knew he wasn't getting any answers out of her, so he resolved himself to asking where. "I think it's called Hosu." "You think dash. The details are a little fuzzy." "Okay," she said, pouting like a kid. He was starting to wonder if she was one at this point. "Fine." He gathered his things and put them back into the bag. He texted his mom and let her know to expect him late. He started to make his way to the train station but noticed a couple staring at him. He rubbed his temple when he realized, yes, he had talked to himself for the last 10 minutes and embarrassed himself. It was only Monday and already a long week. We're not here. He stared at the expanse of forest, a stark contrast to the high-rise buildings barely 1,000 feet away. He wasn't exactly sure where they were going, but she requested they go to the forest and this one was the only one Hosu had. "Perfect," she said. She fluttered her wings and started flying into the forest, leaving him behind. "Hey!" He ran after her to try and catch up, bobbing and weaving between the trees and brush. They walked for some time. It felt like forever if the pain in his feet were any indication. "How much longer are we?" "Not too much." They fell into silence again, their contact with the environment around them the only sounds they could hear. The city had faded into a buzz but went radio silent some time ago. The sounds of cars and people were completely gone. "We're here," she said. Izuku looked ahead and saw nothing but forest. He glanced at her warily and started, "Are you sure this is the right place? Where are we even going?" She looked at him exasperated. "I'm sure. Just step in." She gestured vaguely in front of her and he wasn't sure what he was supposed to step into. He shrugged and braced himself, stepping past another set of trees, and felt something different. It was like moving through jelly. He felt disoriented and odd. "Where dash?" The words died on his lips as he stared at the scenery that wasn't there before. He stood in what looked like an alcove. Trees towering above him, casting shadows where he and Sylvie stood. He could hear faint whispers and laughter coming from somewhere, though he couldn't pinpoint where. Moss and plants littered the ground and lined the trees, and it was bright. Like he had stepped into somewhere welcome and kind. A feeling he couldn't quite explain. "Come on. They're this way," she said, pointing forwards. He nodded, still a bit disoriented, and walked down the cobblestone path that stretched out in front of him. They walked again for some time until they came upon what looked like another clearing. In the center stood a grand oak. Branches swirling upwards and disappearing into the sky. The leaves cast shadows all over but he was still able to see. Moss and grass mixed around the tree and painted the ground, flowers popping up on occasion. "Where are we?" he breathed. He felt like he had stepped into a fairy tale, which was not uncommon as of late. "Hi, Izuku." He whipped his head in the direction of the voice. In front of him was a fairy, wings fluttering gently. She looked bigger, twice the size of Sylvie but still small. Her hair was auburn red and flowed down her sides, complementing her green dress. She looked regal and carried herself with grace. "I'm Adela, monarch of the fairies." He stared at her dumbly, voice refusing to comply, so all he did was nod. He blushed profusely when she giggled at him. "We've been expecting you." "You have?" The words fell out of his mouth before he could process them and he internally screamed at the dumb question. "Yes," she said, giggling again. "When a group of spirits agrees to guard the book, we're expected to teach the magician who finds it as well." "Okay." This was new. The confusion he was feeling must have been apparent because she glanced at Sylvie who was looking anywhere but her. "Yes.It seems like your teacher hasn't been teaching you very well." "Hey, give me a break. It's been a millennium," Sylvie yelled. She looked unconvinced but didn't press it. Yes. I suppose it has. What do you mean by guard? He asked. Well, the book itself is an item from a god. It's been eons so I can't remember who, but ages ago the biggest clans agreed to become the owner of it and switch every few centuries. When the book took a liking to a magician, we were responsible for teaching them. It's been centuries since we've seen a magician though, so we understandably forgot to retrieve the book. Wait. He paused. If you're supposed to teach me, why do you call Sylvie my teacher? Well, usually we seal one of our own in the book and use them as a sort of representative, but it's not uncommon for the group to raise you from a fledgling to a magician. She said it warmly and her voice sounded almost parental. Her expression became amused while she looked at him. I guess you have more questions? He responded with a nod and she smiled. I have some of my own. How about you answer mine and I answer yours? He responded with another nod and she gestured for them to follow. They walked down a hill and through more trees before they arrived at another clearing. This one was much larger. It was shaped like a dome, an expanse of dirt and soil. Trees lined the outer edges and their branches curved overhead, connecting each other. We're going to be doing a bit of practice. Unless you want your shoes to get dirty, I'd go barefoot. He complied, shrugging off his shoes and sock along with his bag and cuffed up his pants. He stepped onto the dirt from the cobblestone. He immediately noticed how wet the ground was and how it was almost like stepping into mud. He shivered but braved it. His mom said if he destroyed another pair of red shoes she wasn't buying another pair of those hideous things, so he'd have to get over it. I want to gauge your progress. We're going to do some energy exercises. Energy exercises? Her eye twitched and she looked over to Sylvie who was suddenly obsessed with flowers. What have you been teaching him? We just kind of jumped into the basics. Straight spells and nothing else really, she said shrugging. Adela sighed and refocused on Izuku. Magic is energy. It's in your body and it's flowing through it. I want you to take it and manifest it into a small ball. Simple stuff. Izuku breathed. He had a lot of visualization practice from the spells he did practice, so this should be easy. He closed his eyes and breathed. He imagined it sort of like blood flowing through him and visualized it forming into a small ball in the palm of his hand. When he felt satisfied, he opened his eyes. He was not expecting to be greeted by a ball the size of a hot air balloon in his hand. His eyes widened at it and he craned his neck to peer over at Adela. She looked surprised more than anything, so he took that as a win. It looks like you know how to control the flow of it, but not the output level. She poked and prodded at the ball and continued, I would suggest a wand to limit your output, but in your world, it might be problematic. We'll come up with a solution so your spells don't backfire on you out there, she said, waving her hand. She tapped the ball and it disappeared into white wisps of light, almost like stars. Now I believe you had a question for me. I was wondering if you knew where the other spirits came from? I see them sometimes but I'm not sure where they come from or what they do. Spirits are mostly born from thought. They rely on being believed in to have power, but some are born from other things like us fairies and nymphs are born from nature. I'm not sure how they still exist in your world though, but you could always ask them. He wasn't sure he wanted to ask them anything with how odd some of them looked, but if he wanted any answers, that looked to be the only option. She clapped her hands together, bringing him back to the present. What other spells do you know? I could do levitation? That one is easy. Let's see it. He figured out one day that he was able to apply the spell to himself. It was like being in zero gravity. It was pretty fun until he almost floated away, but this time should be different. He closed his eyes and breathed again. He pictured himself levitating in the air and chanted, "Leave us." His body felt sort of nauseated, a sign that he had started levitating. He opened his eyes and was high off the ground, floating in midair. He moved his body around wildly, laughing at the feeling. It was fun and he would get over being disoriented one of these days. Izuku, do you know a wind spell? Try moving your body around in the air. Like you're flying. He concentrated energy in his hands and cast the spell, Ventus. He felt winds of air erupt from his hands. He was a bit unprepared for how strong it would be, so he went barreling into the dirt. He heard Sylvie's laugh erupt behind him and he groaned. He stood back up and wiped the dirt off his clothes and sent a glare at her. Adela flew over and assessed him, and when she was sure he was fine, she sighed. When you cast your magic, think of it going through a hole. Make it smaller so you won't cast it harder than you need to. Hole? For example, a hose. The bigger it is, then the more water spills out. So why don't you visualize your magic like water going through a really small one? Izuku blinked stupidly. Why hadn't he thought of that? He cast the levitation spell again, this time picturing his magic entering into a small hole. He felt his body gradually ease into a flightless state. When he looked around him, he realized he didn't go as high, but still a good distance. He then cast the wind spell and positioned his arms behind him, palms facing outwards so he would fly forwards. He flew a bit fast but managed to keep himself going. He tried steering and turning, but smacked into the wall and crumped on the ground like a fly. Sylvie's laugh rang out again and he yelled, not helping. She's still childish as ever, I see. Maybe assigning her to the book wasn't the best idea, Adela said. You think, he bit out. It came out harsher than he meant, so as an afterthought, he added, sorry. Don't be. I understand your frustration. She was younger and didn't have a role here in the woodlands, so we assigned her to the book. Izuku looked over to her and she stared wistfully in the distance. She was so happy to be a guardian. She helped out a few magicians before you, but I'm afraid she's out of practice. Plus everyone is different. How were they different? As I said, every few millennia, a new group of spirit takes ownership of it and guides certain magicians, chosen by it. We got it about 7,000 years ago. The book's chapters change every user. To unlock them, you have to solve the challenges set forth. For one magician, he got to control stars and galaxies. Another got to manipulate elements to his liking. They had to fight hard to get those powers though. Any idea what mine will be? No. Though it looks like you have quite a few missing chapters. So maybe a mix of everything? Who knows? The conversation lapsed into silence after that. Izuku stewed in all the possible powers he could get. He hadn't checked on the next chapter. He wasn't excited about another confusing riddle that would be, undoubtedly, the bane of his existence, so he skimmed the first chapter, trying to find all its secrets and everything it had to offer. Are you going to be my new teacher? He asked, looking at her. He was more thinking out loud than anything, but something about her response caught him by surprise. It was one of those moments where if you blink, you'd miss it. Her face changed suddenly, carved with grief and sorrow, but in the next moment, it was gone. Like it was never there. In part, she said hesitantly. Sylvie can't do it alone, so all the fairies here will help. I'll also provide some instruction and spells they can't and the book doesn't have. She smiled at him and it was warm, devoid of any emotion she had just displayed moments prior. Why don't you get the book so we can see what's next? He walked over to his bag, grabbing the book. Sylvie had busied herself doing something else and ran off. Likely to hang out with the other fairies. He shuffled back to Adela and sat on the ground again and she fluttered beside him so she could look over and read as well. He opened the book and flipped to the back of it, likely where the next riddle would be. He was greeted by what looked like another poem though this time. The letters were in different colors, red, green, blue, and white. They dazzled like glitter on the page and read. A staple of being a magician is being able to inspire. In times of strife, the lesser look to them, searching for hope in their admiration. A good magician must always be able to give people that wonder, even when they are not able to feel it themselves. Venture forth and find people who are in need, and be that pillar for them. Set their hearts anew with something they have yet to experience. This one seemed more straightforward than the last, but still confusing on where he would even start. He looked over to Adela and his heart plummeted when he saw the same confusion written over her face. Does anyone know what these mean? He groaned. She lightly patted his shoulder and cooed, there. We'll figure it out somehow. Do you think I could make a break for it? He asks. He's not totally serious, but he can't lie, part of him wants to run for the hills. She could just teleport you back here, she hisses. And she's not wrong. Adela is very powerful and Izuku didn't expect anything else. He just didn't expect her approach to be so difficult. Yes, that was the word. She was strict if nothing else. She made him practice the same spell repeatedly until he got it right. And he supposed that was fair. She wouldn't be a good teacher if she let him get off the hook. He could understand that. He could not, however, understand how much she made him train. The woodland fairies lived in was a sort of pocket dimension. Apparently, forests are gateways to get here if you knew how. Time worked differently, so only a fraction of the time he spent here passed in his world. When Adela first told him, he rambled on and asked if there were more places like this. To his delight, there were thousands, and if he was lucky, he'd get to experience them. But for right now, that equaled more training for Izuku instead of wonder. That's how he finds himself, barefoot, running away from a golem made of dirt. You'll get the hang of it soon, Izuku. You have to be able to cast on the fly, Sylvie yelled. They wanted him to train his reaction time. So, naturally, Adela ekted a golem from the dirt and ordered it to chase Izuku while he tried to defeat it. Izuku, Adela calls. All you need to do is visualize the energy and hit it with it. I'm trying, he groans. I think your problem is that you cast with your eyes closed. It's a bad habit. It's how I think. The spell he was supposed to cast was an energy blast. All he had to do was hit it and it would dissolve back into the ground where it had come from. The problem was, doing so while it was chasing him wasn't exactly easy. The golem swings, its hulking fist narrowly missing Izuku's head as he dives and rolls. He hears Adela giggle at him and he tries his best not to fall over and cry. He didn't get why the whole visualization thing was necessary. Why couldn't he just cast the spell and it worked, goddammit? Here. She flicks her wrist and the golem goes still for a second but resumes a fighting stance quickly after. I made it a little slower. Try to do it now. Izuku runs and the golem gives chase. He tries to think of a way to immobilize it or at least something that'll keep it busy enough for Izuku to cast. He runs through the small repertoire of spells in his head, thinking of something, anything, that'll keep it busy. He nearly cries in relief when he thinks of one that just might work. He puts his legs into overdrive, trying to get enough distance between him and the golem so he can cast levitation quickly. He manages it, somehow, and quickly casts, his body going weightless in a snap. Thankfully, he practiced it enough that he could do it on the fly. Unfortunately, he doesn't have enough time to cast the wind spell he learned, so the golem smacks him into the far wall, and he heaves. The golem doesn't waste any time and runs to punch him again, so Izuku scrambles and casts the wind spell and flies. He smacks into the ceiling this time. It hurts just as much as when the golem did it, but at least up this high, it couldn't reach. He takes his time to recover, the wind knocked out of him slowly comes back, and then he readies himself. Hoping this would work. He puts more energy than needed into the wind spell so he flies faster than the golem can track. He stops right in front of it, and before it can notice he chants, bind. Vines burst forth from the ground and snake their way around the golem's hulking figure. It moves to punch him but the vines lock him into place before he can release his swing. The golem eyes him and Izuku swears it huffs at him in annoyance. It struggles against the vines and Izuku has to stop himself from cheering at the sight. He can finally be done with this. He breathes, focusing on the magic flowing through him, and pictures it as a blast. Astra. A white beam of light erupts from his hand and flies directly at the golem, flying directly through its center. The smell of charred earth and grass fills his senses and he has to fight the urge to sneeze at it. The golem goes still in its bindings but collapses back into mud soon afterward. Izuku lets out a cheer of triumph, he managed to do it. Congrats Izuku! Adela yells. Now let's do it again. He whips his head around and stares at her, dumbfounded. Again? You closed your eyes while casting again. He short-circuits and accidentally cancels the levitation spell, falling into the ground. He groans and slumps into the dirt. Why did life hate him? He arrived at home sometime later, exhausted. It was still daylight out, so he could sleep for the rest of the day, thankfully. Izuku! You look terrible, honey, where have you been? His mom ran out of the kitchen and enveloped him in a hug. He had to fight the urge to push her off because he knew she meant well, but did she have to choke him? I'm fine, Mom, he wheezed. Oh. Sorry. She stopped hugging him and tried to fix his hair. Did something happen at school? No. I just went for a jog. In your school uniform? She looked at him with one of those looks moms gave when they wanted to express, I know you're lying about something but you won't tell me. Health waits for no one, Mom. Sure Izuku, she sighed. I'm making cold soba today. It'll be ready soon, so get cleaned up. He headed to his room and changed out of his dirty clothes into some sweats and a t-shirt. He collapsed on his bed and sighed. His body felt run ragged and he hadn't even done anything physical. Is this what having a quirk felt like? You look terrible. Sylvie flitted in his vision, breaking him out of his thoughts. He nearly slapped her out of the air. It's 'cause you can't teach me that I'm stuck with Adela. She's been so difficult and I'm tired. You'll be fine. It's all to make you better at magic. And why do I want to do that? She looked pained for a second but smiled brightly instantly afterward. Because you want to? He was starting to feel that maybe he should have put that book on any shelf and went home, blissfully unaware. What are we going to do about the second chapter? I have no idea how to unlock it. And it was true. He wasn't sure about the whole inspiring thing. He wasn't exactly a motivator. He preferred to fade into the background most days, and talking to people wasn't exactly his forte. And that was putting it lightly. Maybe go out and help people, she offered. It wasn't a bad idea, but he had a feeling it was going to be a lot more complicated than that. But he had nothing better to offer, so that was going to have to work for now. Like what? I volunteer, but it can't be that simple, can it? Who knows? Beats doing nothing, she said, shrugging. His mom called his name for dinner shortly after and Sylvie disappeared in a poof. Something he realized he was getting used to, begrudgingly. He headed towards the kitchen and sat at the table, chowing down on his cold soba with the grace of a crazed animal. Izuku, calm down, it's not going anywhere. In my mouth. His mouth was stuffed, so it came out muffled and gross, which caused his mother to sigh. I thought I raised a boy with manners. He coughed, embarrassed, and slowed down his pace to match hers. They talked about anything new in their lives. His mom had gotten promoted and started to make more money. It meant seeing her less often, but he would cope if it meant her being happier. On Izuku's end, it was less interesting. He still wasn't sure how to bring up the whole magic thing. Should he tell her it's a quirk or the truth, so that left details about school and entrance exams coming up sometime in the near future. Dinner was over quickly, his mom gathered the plates and started washing them. Izuku started to straighten up the table and living room. I wonder if there's a cleaning spell somewhere in the book, he thought absent-mindedly. Hey, Mom. Yes, honey? If you wanted to inspire someone, what would you do? Inspire? She looked at him curiously, checking to make sure she heard him right. He responded with a nod and she hummed, thinking it over. I guess I would find someone in need? There are so many people who get overlooked in the world, you know? We have it easy, well, financially, but not everyone else. I guess I would volunteer. Or find any way to help. This time, he hummed. It was basically what Sylvie said, just a little more long-winded. The problem was finding people who exactly needed help or were in need. Anyone could help homeless people or donate their money. What was something he could only do? He felt a hand ruffle his hair and he looked over to see his mom smiling softly at him. You're a good kid, Izuku. Never lose that. She kissed his forehead and walked to her room. Izuku finished cleaning and headed off to bed soon after, mind turning over idea after idea. The bell rang, signaling the end of another uneventful school day. Izuku silently packed away his things. Adela had given him a few days off, so he would probably go home and read more of the grimoire, practicing whatever spells he hadn't yet. He made his way out of the school building, starting the trek home. He wondered, offhandedly, if there was a teleportation spell he could use to get to places faster. That would be convenient, wouldn't it? He started thinking about more spells he could use in his day-to-day life and mentally made a list to ask Adela if she knew any. His thinking didn't get to last very long as he felt something crash into him abruptly, sending him flying across the street. Magician. I need your help. He sat up, dazed, and eyed his surroundings, trying to find the source of the voice. His eyes widened considerably when he saw a talking cat looking at him frantically. It was red and white and had a split tail with flames on the tips of them. Me? Yes, you. You're the only one who can see us and my human needs help. Wait, he said, shaking his head. You're human? Yes. Now come on. The cat shot off and Izuku scrambled to run after it, still, a bit dazed from how hard he hit the ground. He heard the sound of a familiar poof beside him and looked to see Sylvie had appeared. Hey! You can't jostle the book like that when I'm in it. And why are you running so fast? I don't know, he said, breathless. She looked at him with confusion, but continued to fly beside him as he ran. Izuku weaved through the alleys behind buildings, desperately trying to keep up with the cat. They ran for what felt like forever until the cat finally stopped and Izuku was able to catch up with it. He found himself standing in the middle of a long street, buildings lining up the side of the road. He realized that they ended up downtown, and he has no idea what's going on, but whatever it is bad. There were cars strewn all over the street and people running frantically to where Izuku just came from. He pushes past the crowd, trying to get a grasp on the situation, and realizes that they're in the middle of a villain fight. There are a couple of pro-heroes on the scene and police are behind them, hiding behind their squad cars. He can't exactly make out what the villain they're fighting is since they're facing it and block Izuku's vision, but he can see the ice flying around haphazardly. What's going on? He asks. The cat turns and looks at him, body shifting as it floats in midair. My human is in that building over there. The cat flicks its tail at a building beside the heroes and police, a small distance from where they're standing. I need you to get her out. The heroes don't know she's in there and she's too scared to come out. He has so many questions but the cat is looking at him so frantically he can't bring himself to ask them. His legs move before he can fully process what he's doing and he sprints directly at the building, entering through the front. He's thankful none of the police notice him, otherwise, he might be in trouble. The building he enters looks like an office one. There's desks all around, some turned over from the people likely exiting in haste. He looks around, trying to find any sign of the person the cat is talking about but can't find anything. Where is she? The cat flicks its tail, this time pointing upward, and speaks. She's on the 3rd floor hiding in a closet. Izuku sprints for the stairs, running up them with as much speed as he can muster. He trips going up one of them as the building quakes. He hears glass shattering and things flying. He gets back up, determined, and heads up the next flight of stairs. The 3rd floor is much like the first one, desks and chairs litter the floor. Izuku follows the cat as it guides him to where the little girl is hiding. As they move through the hallways, he keeps his head low, careful in case some more glass breaks. He also looks around for a sign that anyone else could be hiding. After a bit of walking, they arrive at a closet at the end of a long hall, past some of the offices by the stairs. He readies himself and moves to open the closet, but when the knob doesn't turn he realizes that it's locked, and that complicates things even more. "Why aren't you opening it?" the cat hisses. "It's locked," he replies, his voice frantic. He tries knocking on the door, hoping maybe she would open it, but is met with no response. He can hear a small shuffling behind the door and realizes that she's in there, but is probably too scared to open it. The building shakes again and the sound of glass shattering fills the hallway. He panics, not entirely sure what to do, but before it can derail into something more, he feels something touch his shoulder. He looks over to see Sylvie is trying to get his attention, likely to calm down, and he breathes in and out, trying to steady himself. "Hello," he calls out. He doesn't get a response, but the girl shuffles behind the door again and he realizes he's gotten her attention. "I'm here to help. My name is Izuku." "Are you a hero?" he hears the girl ask. Her voice comes out slightly watery as she sniffles. "No, I'm not. I promise I can still help you get out though." "But," she pauses, hiccuping, "you're not a hero." "I know, but I still want to help if you'll let me." She doesn't respond but continues to hiccup and sniffle. Izuku thinks, trying to think of other things that he could say to help coax her out. She was scared and small and wanted a hero. He was the same way when he was little, so he couldn't blame her, but there had to be some way he could get through to her. She has a big family at home. "Try that," the cat says. He nods, determined. He can work with that. "You know, I have a mom at home. I wish I had siblings, but it's always just been me and her at home. I used to pretend one of my best friends was my brother." He realizes he's rambling, but doesn't let the flow of words stop. He was the best and his quirk was so cool. "I miss him sometimes." "Where did he go?" the girl asks. "He moved away, but we still see each other sometimes." "What about you? Do you have any siblings?" They lapse into silence again and Izuku worries that he may not have gotten through to her. He starts to think of what else he can talk about, but then he hears, "I have 2 brothers at home and a sister." "What are they like?" he asks softly. "My brothers are so gross and stupid, but my sister is so nice. She's older than me but sometimes she'll play superhero with me. They sound so nice. I'm sure they're worried about you." She sniffles again and says, "Yeah. I don't want to worry them." "Do you want me to take you outside so you can go home?" he asks, voice pleading. "Yes," she says. Her voice is quivering and watery, but she sounds a bit better than she does before. He hears a soft click and the door opens, revealing a small girl no older than 8 with red-rimmed eyes. She has a primary school outfit on and an All Might bag, much like the one he has on too. "Look, we match," he says, pointing to his bag. The little girl laughs and wipes her eyes. "Now why don't I get you outside?" They headed towards a window away from the heroes so he could use his powers without getting caught. He casted a levitation spell and gently led them towards the ground with the use of a wind spell. He set her down and breathed a sigh of relief. "Thank you." He looked over and the cat spirit from earlier looked happy and Izuku couldn't help the smile that crossed his face. "Wait. When you called her your human earlier, what did you mean? You don't know?" The cat looks at him incredulously and Izuku feels like he should be the one having that look since he's the one talking to a cat. "We let humans use our powers. It's how they have dash." The cat's voice is drowned out by a loud boom sounding off not too far from where they were standing. Izuku peers around from the edge of the building and sees Endeavor laid out flat in between the wreckage of cars. He tries to see what villain could possibly be doing this damage but goes shock still when he sees something familiar standing in the middle of the road. "It's a Yukiana," he says breathlessly. Her nails are longer now, to the point where they resemble claws. Her kimono is stained red with what looks like blood. Her hair is suspended in air, defying gravity, and she has long horns protruding from her forehead. He doesn't miss the way her body flickers, like a light going dim but then just as bright the next. "What's happening? I thought people couldn't see spirits." "They can if they choose to or if they're too emotional. I'm guessing it's the latter because she looks angry and has been rampaging for a while now," the cat says. He looks on, fear mixed with awe. She's defeated every hero who so much as came close to her. What was going on? "Mister?" His attention is refocused on the little girl beside him. "Who are you talking to?" He flushes in embarrassment, forgetting that she can't see the spirits. "No one, you just run that way and get home. It's dangerous here." He points toward the way he came from and she nods. She doesn't move for a moment, body shaking with nervousness. Izuku pats her on the head and smiles. "You're going to be okay. You're safe now." She nods, face determined, and runs off toward the crowd of people. Her spirit follows after her, mumbling a quick "thank you," and leaves. Izuku, Sylvie calls. He looks at her and notices her finger pointing at his bag and realizes it's glowing, much like the first time. He hurries further behind the building, careful to not garner anyone's attention, and opens it. This time the grimoire glows a mix of red, blue, green, and white. He's not sure what the colors mean, but he has a feeling it's tied to the spells he's about to unlock once he opens it. He braces himself and pries it open, prepared to black out again, but instead, the light glows brighter. Izuku has to look away. It hurts to look at directly, but then it subsides, recessing into the pages. He looks back at it and reads the first page. Chapter 2, The Elements. Geomancy. Hydromancy. Pyromancy. Aeromancy. Restricted. He wants to read more, but the ground shakes again and makes Izuku painfully aware of the situation he's in. He looks at Sylvie and she looks pained, but says, "Okay. You're going to have to defeat that spirit." "What?" he chokes out. "It's a spirit and a powerful one at that. There's no way those heroes could defeat it. It's only going to do more damage," she pleads. "But I'm not a vigilante." "Well, you have to be. We have no other choice. But they'll arrest me. I know a transformation spell I can teach you. It'll change what you look like, but we need to help." Her tone leaves no more room for argument and Izuku groans. He throws his bag to the ground and places the book on top of it. The spell is shift shape. He breaths and chants, "Shift shape." A white glow envelopes him and he wonders if he was supposed to visualize what he looked like before he cast it, but it's too late now. He'll have to worry about that later. Sylvie looks at him like he's grown a second head and Izuku can't help but say, "What?" "Nothing," she says, shaking her head. "It suits you." She flies over to the grimoire and picks it up, with some difficulty, and hands it to Izuku. "Memorize a few fire spells quickly and get ready to fight." He feels his heart hammer in his chest but obliges. He flies through the chapter and reads the fire section as quickly as he can. He makes a note of any that look useful and tosses it back to the ground. "I'm ready." "Good. Now you need to cast levitation and that wind spell and get over there." Izuku does as he says and lifts up from where stands. He flies over to the roof of a building, not too close, but not too far either. He assesses the situation, noting how Endeavor is trying to fight her again but losing terribly. His fire isn't even touching her and the other heroes are knocked out cold. "Okay, what do I do?" He knows the question is stupid but he can't help but ask it. He feels overwhelmed by the number of things that happened in the last 30 minutes. "You just need to fight it. Treat it like Adela's golem." She says it perfectly calm and level as if this situation is not radically different. "But that's fine. Once I beat it, what do I do? I'll tell you what spell to cast once that happens." He nods and steadies himself. This was really happening. He was about to go from civilian to vigilante in the span of an hour. Any day now. "Save it," he hisses. He flies over to where the Yukiana is. She stands in the center of the road, the ground frozen over with ice beside her. Endeavor looked terrible. His suit was all ripped and he was littered with scratches and cuts while the Yukion looked unfazed. Endeavor turns his attention over to him and barks, "Who are you? And why are you wearing that stupid get-up?" Izuku flushes in embarrassment. Whatever he's wearing can't be that bad but he replies, "A vigilante. I've got this under dash." Whatever he says is cut painfully short as he's sent flying into a nearby building. Izuku's eyes widen and he realizes that he's in the middle of a battle. He needs to focus. He turns to Yukiana who eyes him with scorn. Neither of them move for a second, staring down at one another in apprehension. Izuku wonders if it's going to stop but feels the air turn ice cold and he instinctively dives, narrowly missing a spear made of ice. He casts the spells to fly again and shoots off into the air, putting some distance between them. He sees her about to cast again and quickly chants one of the fire spells he learned minutes ago. Draco Anima. Fire spills out his mouth, the flames a brilliant red, and hits the Yukiana head-on. She screams and it's so startling that he accidentally falls out of the air. He scrambles to get back up but he's too slow and he's hit with a blast of ice that sends him flying into a building, much like she did to Endeavor earlier. The impact leaves him rattled, but surprisingly, nothing is broken, so he staggers back up and readies himself to fight again. For Mare, whip. He feels his hands grow warmer as the fire spills out of them. It dances and shifts, slowly taking shape into the form of a whip as he instructed it. They're extremely long, but this is perfect for what he needs to do. He can't attack her head-on, so he'll settle from doing it from a distance and a whip was the best thing he could think of. He runs at the spirit and swings it as hard as he can and nearly cries in relief when it connects. The spirit screams again but this time he's prepared, so he takes the opportunity and swings the one in his other hand. He's a bit clumsy, so it almost misses, but it hits her side with a sharp crack. The air is filled with steam as fire meets ice and he can't see her. He hears nothing, so he thinks for a second maybe he's won, but feels the air shift above him and dives. Spikes start raining down from the sky like rain and he's forced to cancel the fire spell and run around the street, trying to avoid them. Izuku! Sylvie calls. The ground. He follows where she's pointing and notices how the ground around her is earth again and remembers the spell he used against the golem yesterday and thinks maybe he can win this. Bind. Vines spill from the ground and she's too focused on raining spikes on him, so she misses the way they snake around her and latch on, rendering her immobile. The onslaught of ice. Spear stops and Izuku can stop and recover, catching his breath. Izuku, it isn't going to hold. You have to cast the spell now. He groans but makes his way over to the Yukiana. She looks furious and towers above him, but he steels himself and repeats the spell Sylvie chants, Exilium. He doesn't know what he expected, but for the spirit to promptly disappear was not in any of his expectations. The vines preciously hold her fall and start to shrivel. He starts to cheer, grateful this nightmare is finally over. However, a blast of searing heat shoots past him and he is brought back to the present, alarmed. He looks up and sees Endeavor look murderous and realizes that he just did that all as a vigilante and that he has to run. Sylvie, he calls. She flies over to him and places her hand on his shoulder and teleports them. It's a rush job, so Izuku arrives at their destination, falling to the floor in a heap. He sighs and silently curses God for his bad luck. He looks around and realizes that they've landed in his bathroom. He picks himself off the floor, careful not to jostle any of his wounds, and looks in the mirror. What the hell am I wearing? He shrieks. He eyes his reflection, slightly horrified. He looks taller for one. His hair is now down to his back and straight. His face looks like his but more feminine. It's more freckled now and his eyes are more slanted. His nose is also thinner and his lips look fuller. He's wearing something that looks vaguely maid-like. There's a black bow at his chest that sits directly above his chest. The chest area is white and there's a black corset with laces below it that flow down into a frilly black material. It sits above the skirt that looks just like it except fuller. The sleeves are long and white. At the end, they're slightly wider and there's lace-like material paired with a bow at the end. He looks down at his lower half and realizes he's wearing black stockings and heels. How he fought in those, he has no idea. He hears Sylvie giggle behind him and points a finger furiously at her. This is your fault. You cast the spell. How did I even end up like this? What was the last thing you watched? Izuku's face scrunches up, but then he gapes when he realizes what it was. Sailor Moon. I guess you put your own spin on it. I'm going to die, he groaned. What was that, Izuku? Nothing, Mom. Chapter 5. The next day at school is hell for Izuku. He wakes up and feels like he's been hit by a truck. The fight from yesterday is the most magic he's ever used at once. He's used to backlash from overworking himself, but this feels like an entirely new hell. He's already nursing a headache and the last thing he needs is for the school to be positively alive with everyone talking about the new vigilante. Have you seen her? She's so cute, he hears one girl say. It takes everything in him not to groan. He looks around the room for Tsukiko, hoping he can talk to somebody to take his mind off everything, but she isn't here. He's been trying to avoid thinking about the whole transformation fiasco. He fought in front of the whole world in a maid outfit, and he wasn't even mad at the outfit but the fact he didn't even get to choose his costume because he was rushing. People are already trying to name her. I think she should be called Venus. Why Venus? She kinda reminds me of that girl from Sailor Moon. Plus she has a fire quirk. Well, there goes any chance of changing his outfit. He supposes it's not entirely bad. It keeps his identity hidden well enough, and with the way Endeavor tried to cook him yesterday, he can already tell the Hero Commission won't be a fan. What was she fighting yesterday though? Izuku doesn't know the answer to that either. He'd almost gotten answers out of the cat spirit yesterday, but he had to fight the spirit before it did any more collateral damage. He knew something had happened to it, but he doesn't know what. He thought about asking some of the spirits at school, but oddly he doesn't see any today. He also wonders if this is going to be a continued thing. He lucked out in the first fight if he's honest. He's no fighter by any stretch of the imagination, he just managed to have the right spell and a good distance, but anything up close and he'd probably get his butt kicked. Fun. Will you extras shut the F up? Bakugo roars. Who the F wants to hear about some beach fighting in a maid outfit? It's FING stupid. Izuku tries not to feel slighted by this comment. Bakugo doesn't know it's him. Though if he did, it probably wouldn't change anything, to be honest. He huffs and sits back in his seat, muttering curses about the rest of the class everyone pretends not to hear. Bakugo seems angry by even his standards today. Izuku hopes he's not on the receiving end of whatever's gotten him so riled up today. The class continues in this tense silence for the rest of the day, and Izuku takes to reflecting on whatever happened yesterday. The fight left too many unanswered questions to just leave alone. Not to mention he has a whole new chapter of spells he hasn't had the chance to look at properly. There was also the third chapter he had yet to look into. He didn't want to imagine what riddle was waiting for him this time. He silently cheers when the bell rings and packs up his things as quickly as he can. He's decided that he's going to search out some spirits to ask about yesterday to see if they had any information. He makes it a good distance, about halfway to the train station so he can head to Hosu, but then he hears him. Deku! Where the F are you going? He sighs. He knew there was a catch to this train of good luck he's been having these past few days. One could argue it ended yesterday though. What do you want, Bakugo? Don't think I haven't seen you running around these past few days and being secretive as shit. Izuku froze. He isn't that obvious, is he? Something is up. You're just imagining dash. Don't fing lie to me, Deku. Bakugo walked up to him, hands popping like mini grenades, and snarled. What the F are you doing, Deku? When Izuku didn't say anything, Bakugo growled and sent an explosion directed at his shoulder. Izuku tumbled back, clutching his shoulder in pain. What the F is that? Izuku followed Bakugo's line of sight to figure out where he was looking, and his eyes widened when he realized his hand was glowing. He hid it behind his back and prayed it stopped glowing. He did not need this today of all days. What are you hiding, you little sheet dash? Boys! The sudden authoritative voice made them stop and look over. Neither of them expected to see what looked like a homeless man staring at them with blood-red eyes and hair all over the place. Mind explaining what's going on? This lying foo dash. We were just practicing with our quirks. Izuku blurted out. He scrambled to his feet and shot Bakugo the most menacing glance he could muster. Play along went unsaid. Quirk use is prohibited without a license. Izuku wasn't sure if it was a threat or a statement with how dangerous it sounded. Well, that's fing stupid. How are we supposed to practice for entrance exams? Bakugo huffed. Kakin, will you please? Well, it's true. And I know they expect us to use our fing quirks dash. Boys, he pinched the bridge of his nose and sighed. Just go to a quirk dojo. The annoyance in his voice made them pause, and they nodded their heads in response, careful not to get in trouble. In the back of Izuku's mind, he wondered if this man was a pro hero, considering he used his quirk without a second thought. What school are you guys applying for? Izuku felt himself mentally stumble at the question. That was the last thing he expected to be asked. The sentiment didn't seem to be shared with Bakugo as he perked up at the question. UA. I'm gonna be the best fing hero out of these wannabes, he said matter-of-factly. There was this confidence that Bakugo just exuded that Izuku had to admire, regardless of how he felt about him. It was as inspiring as it was irritating. You? Izuku's head snapped back up when he realized the man was talking to him. I guess? It oddly felt like a lie. He hadn't thought about it for a while, and sure he still wanted to go to U.A, but it didn't feel realistic. Magic wouldn't fly under the radar, and it seemed like more trouble than it was worth. The man eyed him but didn't press it, which Izuku was thankful for. Bakugo was surprisingly quiet at his answer. He wasn't sure whether it was a good or bad sign, but he had more pressing issues at the moment. The still unnamed man checked his phone before pocketing it and giving the boys one final glare. Look forward to seeing you at the entrance exams, and jogged off. Before Izuku could process what exactly that sentence meant, Bakugo was screaming in his ear along with the sound of crackling palms. Now tell me what your quirk is, you piece of s-dash. Sorry, gotta go. He ran off in the direction of the train station and Bakugo took off after him. Only this time, Izuku was able to outrun him with the help of a certain wind spell and a little bit of déjà vu. After finally making it to Hosu, Izuku was ready to start looking for answers. He walked aimlessly through the streets looking for any sign of a spirit to get answers out of, but frustratingly they seemed to just disappear without a trace. Where are all the spirits when you need them? He huffed. Maybe they're off to lunch? You're not helping. He got a few stray glances in his direction, but he was too frustrated to actually pay them any mind. Hey, I'm trying my best here. Aren't you a spirit? Can't you I don't know, sense them? She started to retort but then realized that she had forgotten she could. Actually we can. It's something I forgot to teach you. You know what, just teach me. She explained the process of sensing spirits and it sounded simple at least. It involved just feeling for magic because apparently, spirits had an energy that felt a lot like it, just a bit different. He closed his eyes and tried to search for a feeling that felt similar to casting spells. It took him a minute to grasp it, but he eventually felt it. He saw what looked like a white flickering flame among the outlines of buildings and figured that must be where the spirit is hiding. He opened his eyes and looked towards the direction he remembered and saw an alley. He broke off in a sprint, praying that the spirit would still be there by the time he made it over. He sent a silent thank you to the gods when he saw what looked like a rabbit with wings. He also thanked them for it not being too nightmarish. The rabbit spirit looked at him, at first out of curiosity, but then one of horror. It hurriedly tried to fly off, but Izuku wasn't going to let it. He flew over with a wind spell and grabbed it by the foot before it could go anywhere. It kept squirming in his grasp and Izuku was out of breath trying to keep it from flying off. "Wait," he yelled. "Why are you trying to run? I don't want to talk to you. Everybody calm down," Sylvie yelled. The rabbit turned around and looked at Sylvie, and promptly calmed down. "You trust him?" the rabbit asked. "Why would she not?" Izuku asked him. This time the rabbit sighed and looked at him directly. "I'm not going to run so you can let me go, kid." Izuku obliged, slightly doubtful, but let him go nonetheless. "It's because you exiled a spirit yesterday. Everyone saw it and is scared you'll do it to us too." "Wait," he said, shaking his head. "She was fighting other people, what choice did I have?" "Well, the rumor said she was fighting you because you were going to exile her." "What rumors? That's not even what happened. You know how rumors go. One person says one thing and the next person says another." Izuku had to pinch the bridge of his nose to stifle his sigh. He was getting a headache and he hadn't even gotten halfway through the day. "Look, Mr. Rabdash. I'm a Skvader kid, not a rabbit." "Right, Skavder. Anyway, I didn't exile her because I wanted to, she was just destroying everything." "Well, I know that now, but still you spooked everybody. The first magician to show up in centuries and he starts exiling spirits, so what else do we do?" Okay, that was fair. He guessed he would be scared too, but still how could it get so misinterpreted if it happened in front of dozens of people? It felt off, but he diced to chalk it up to his paranoia more than anything else. Sylvie suddenly cut in and asked, "Do you have any idea why she would start attacking humans? Do I look like a fortune teller to you? You look like a botched experiment dash." He stepped in between the two spirits and pushed them away gently. "Alright, getting off track you guys." They both groaned but didn't seem to be hostile anymore. "So, any idea why he would do that?" "I don't know. We don't even show ourselves to humans anymore. My guess is that somebody set her off enough to cause her to manifest, but how, I don't know. That doesn't make any sense. If they can't see you, how would anyone PSS off her?" "A Yukiana at that," he said incredulously. "They used to eat men alive, so he doubts her first resort would be to attack everybody." "Maybe they set off her human," the Skvader said. "Her human?" Izuku asked. "Is that fairy teaching you anything for Kami's sake?" the Skvader groaned. "Hey! It's better if he learns these things himself," Sylvie said defensively. "And I'm his teacher all of the sudden dash." "Okay, again, off topic," Izuku said with a sigh. "Can you just answer the question, please? I won't ask you anything else. We let humans use some of our powers. Why? You guys got more advanced and if you weren't children you didn't believe in us anymore. We started disappearing and one day we figured we'd let you use some of our power. You play with it for about a century, and we get it back stronger and better." That made sense, for the most part. He remembered Adela mentioning that magicians declined due to humans having technology, so it was more novel and then faded out. He guessed spirits could have done the same thing. "Can I go now?" the Skvader begged. "Yeah, sorry." As the rabbit-bird hybrid started to fly away, he called out to it. "If you hear any rumors about me, clear them up. I don't want the spirits to be afraid of me." The Skvader didn't make any sign he heard Izuku, so they could only hope the rumors would die down eventually. He turned to Sylvie, her mind running miles with questions. It felt like a bomb had been dropped on him and the whole purpose of him talking to a spirit was to get answers. Now he just felt like he was back at square one. If magic died out, then why do I have it? He was talking out loud more than anything, but he didn't miss the way Sylvie's face flashed with grief before being devoid of any emotion just as quickly. "You're not telling me something," he says to her. She looks taken aback by the confrontation. "It's not time, Izuku." He groans and punches the alley wall, and to his surprise, the brick cracks under his fist and the building shakes. "You have to be careful. Your magic makes your body stronger than the average human. You can't just do stuff like that when you're angry." "Whatever," he huffed. It was childish, he would admit, but she was keeping something. He intended to find out in due time. "I'm still confused on why the spirit attacked everybody. I doubt she would do all that over a human." Sylvie shrugged. He wasn't sure if it was innocent or if she was hiding something, but he decided not to press it. "Why don't we go practice some of your new spells?" "Beats punching the wall." "Shut up." This time he chuckled and swatted at her. "Let's go." Tsukachi considered himself a rational man. For every cause, there was an effect and vice versa. It's what the detective life taught him over the past 2 decades. There was a reason for everything, good or bad. It's why these new cases felt baffling. The first one was a murder or looked to be like one at the very least. He had just arrived at the coroner's office to view the body. He saw Kenji waiting for him by the door and sighed. It was going to be a long day. "Tsukachi, long time no see." "Hey Kenji," he said, opening the office door. "I know you already met the coroner and viewed the autopsy, so brief me." "Sure," the humanoid dog responded. Her name was Tamura Rin. She was 26, an office worker, and pretty normal as far as things go. Nothing too special about her. Quirk, simple ice quirk. Nothing too strong, but she could have been a hero if she practiced enough, I guess. Tsukachi quietly thought over the details he was given as he walked to the morgue section in the building. There was no clear motive, for now, as to why she would get killed. She sounded boring, all things considered, and that was coming from him, of all people. Hard to imagine a salaried worker would get on anyone's bad side enough to warrant losing her life. He walked down the hall until he came face to face with the door at the end of the hall. It never got any easier seeing dead bodies up close, but he lived the work so he would deal with it. He braved himself, Kenji right behind him, and pushed open the door, and walked into the room. It smelled like death. It was the only way to describe it. The room was teetering on the edge of unbearably cold, and the antiseptic felt like it was going to burn his nose off. He searched the different lockers until he saw her name written in black scrawl on one of them. "It's pretty gruesome," Kenji said solemnly. He was used to it, Tsukachi reasoned to himself. He had seen bodies set ablaze, bodies frozen to death, so this shouldn't be any different. Or so he thought. When he opened the locker and slid the body out, he swallowed the bile that suddenly rose in his throat. The body was an unnatural shade of gray. It started from her left foot and worked its way up almost like a virus. It covered her entire left leg and everything above her midsection. It was like she decomposed in a matter of seconds. He said a silent prayer that the face had been covered by her bangs. He couldn't stand the sight any longer and slid it back inside the locker. What could have caused that?" he asked, mortified. "Emitter-type quirk is my best guess, but I've never seen anything like it. Officers who discovered it said even the ground and grass around it was gray. Like the life was just sked out of everything," Tsukachi said, finishing for him. "Right." There was this tense silence that invaded the room for a few minutes. Tsukachi was trying to figure out how he was going to get that out of his mind tonight, and Kenji was trying to give him space. Any family? Single mother, died years ago though. Good. That made his job easier at least. Any news on the other case? The villain fight a day ago? He continued when Tsukachi nodded. She took out over a dozen heroes. The only person that stopped her was a vigilante, and then, poof, they both disappeared. We've never seen before, and Endeavor has been patrolling nearly 24 hours looking to kill her. The dog-human hybrid pinched his nose and huffed. "Let me know if you hear anything new and if any bodies turn up like this one. And get somebody to remove Endeavor from patrols for the next week." As if, he practically set the other heroes on fire for not helping. Not that he did anything either. Tsukachi let out a small chuckle. He doesn't know how these will pan out, but he can only pray nothing else turns up like these, cause it was starting to give him a headache coffee couldn't even chase away. He walked to the door, and before he left he said bye to Kenji and started to think of how to start with these cases. What to practice, he thought out loud. He stared down the new chapter and he was honestly too giddy to choose just one. Elemental quirks always fascinated him. They were so adaptable and strong, and now the most fundamental ones laid at his feet for him to choose. He had already used fire once, so that was out of the question. He'd revisit it someday, but it was probably his least favorite element by far. That left hydro, aero, and geomancy. Aero would probably be the most versatile and quick, but he would prefer power if anything. That left hydro and geo, and between the two, geo sounded the strongest, so he would settle for that. Adela had taken Sylvie somewhere to speak to her in private. Probably to scold her for being such a terrible teacher if he had to guess. So that meant he would practice by himself for the time being. He just hoped it wouldn't be too difficult. He flipped a few pages until he got to the geomancy section, and it was a lot different from the ones he saw in the first chapter. Where those were just spells and their descriptions, this one talked a lot about technique and how to control the earth. There were even drawings showing the form and illustrations on magicians controlling the earth. The art of divination relies heavily on manipulating the world around us. While hydromancy and pyromancy are situational, geomancy and aeromancy are elements that exist around us at all times. They each have their strengths and weakness, but geomancy, in particular, is one, if not the strongest. The earth is rich in mana that we can manipulate and use to aid us in travel, building, and protecting ourselves. If you think of it as an extension of you, you can bend it at your will and turn nature into a weapon at your command. That seemed straightforward enough. He stopped being picky about wording ages ago. He looked further into the section and there were still spells, but they required you to be able to manipulate the ground before you were able to use them, well, most of them. He wondered if the fire section had been like that. He was in such a rush he probably skipped over it if it did. Sighing, he put the book down and tried to mimic what he saw in the book. All he had to do was control the magic present beneath him. That should be simple. He concentrated on the dirt in front of him, visualizing it rising out of the ground like a pillar. He concentrated as hard as he could but nothing happened. It felt like he was about to have an aneurysm while staring at the ground. He tried again, but this time he tried using hands motion almost like he was playing a video game. The ground still had yet to move, so he tried to focus more and picture it. He stayed like that for several minutes before finally, the ground started to move a little. It rose off the ground barely an inch before he let his control over it go. He was exhausted. His body was sweaty and he had a bad headache forming. He was able to use fire easily, so he couldn't understand why this was so hard. Could it have been the adrenaline, or did the elements just work differently? His train of thought came to a halt when he heard the fluttering of wings and turned to see Adela and Sylvie come back into the clearing. "Practicing?" Adela asked. "Yeah. I'm trying to learn geomancy, but the ground just won't move." "Don't beat yourself up, that's probably the second hardest one," she responded kindly. "What's the hardest one?" "Hydro. It requires a lot of fine control. Even some of the best couldn't do it." He groaned. While learning how to use all the elements wasn't a requirement, he didn't want to just skip over the chapter entirely. "I managed to use pyro the other day though." "Yes, but that one is unique a bit. People don't really manipulate it, rather they use it situationally. So, a lot of it is casting a few spells for specific uses while Geo is trying to actively control and maintain control of everything around you." He guessed that made sense. That explained why he didn't see a whole page devoted to explaining how to manipulate it like Geo. "I never asked, but what exactly is the restricted section? I can't read any of them yet." Adela froze for a split second, which Izuku sort of anticipated. They're spells that require huge amounts of magic or have a dire cost to them. He stared at her, eyes full of morbid curiosity, and she sighed, but continued. "For example, there's one I know called Scatcherigo. It creates a wellspring from the earth that can heal a person of any affliction, but, he asked, sensing the edge in her voice. "It drains the caster of their life force as it heals the other person. It's like an exchange. You give and it takes. Thankfully more elementary healing spells have no cost other than your mana, so that one is dire for a reason." He supposed that was fair. Everything had its limits. Quirks. Technology, everything was finite. It was only reasonable magic was the same, at least in more extreme cases. It lit up a fire of determination under him though. He would get stronger so he could see what was in the restricted section. More out of curiosity than actually wanting to use them. "Now, why don't we get you to practice geomancy some more?" Adela asked. This time he sensed wickedness behind her words and knew he was doomed. "Yes, ma'am." It had been a few days since he practiced using elemental magic. He focused on Geo for now, but he dipped his toe in other elements every now and then. He found water the most difficult, and it was no surprise there considering what Adela said, but still, he hated that he lacked any real control, so he couldn't use it for now. He had a little proficiency with Geo, if you counted being able to grow some flowers and change small sections of dirt into sand. He'd rather use it than fire since it was less flashy, but he didn't have much of a choice from the looks of it. There was also the issue of the third chapter. When he checked it, he was a bit confused. The text was unreadable, a lot like the restricted section. The text was silver and that was all he knew for certain. He knew from the last chapter, the colors of the text correlated to an element or some sort of characteristic of the magic he was to unlock, but what could it mean? He drove himself half crazy trying to figure it out, but Sylvie suggested he focus on school and mastering the other elements before he tried to move on to the next. The ringing of the school bell indicated lunch was over, and it was time to head to homeroom for the final PRD of the day. He got up reluctantly and started the trek back to class and groaned at the thought of walking into the classroom. Bakugo kept his distance recently, but he was unnerved by his stares. He knew he had powers thankfully he thought it was a quirk so he had less to worry about, but he wasn't sure how to explain it. He hadn't even told his mom yet. His thoughts were interrupted when he bumped into someone. "Watch it, you fing freak," Bakugo growled. Of course, he had to have the worst luck alive. He wouldn't be Izuku Midoriya if he didn't suffer. "Whatever," he mumbled. Bakugo started screaming curses at him, but he just ignored him and went to his seat. So I know you all are ready to go home, but his teacher stopped and held up what looked like a form. You have to decide on your high school and announce them. Oh no. He excitedly passed out the forms, and it seemed like he wasn't alone in his sentiment. The class started getting louder and louder as everyone beamed with excitement. Izuku was trying to stop the impending panic attack and breathe. Truth be told, it had been some time since he thought about high school. He wanted to go to Udade all his life, but now that he had some sort of powers he found himself less content with the idea. He could probably ace whatever exam they had, no problem, but his powers were unpredictable and he didn't know how he would keep it all under wraps. Especially since he used some of it being a vigilante. So then what did that leave? He wanted to be a hero since he could talk, but now it was a bit too risky. He also wasn't too into much other stuff besides analysis and sketching. Maybe an art school, he thought absent-mindedly. He didn't know any fine art schools to save his life though. Midoriya, a voice called out to him. He looked up and realized all eyes were on him and flushed in embarrassment. Had he been talking to himself the whole time? Why are they staring? What did he say? You need to announce your high school pick, his teacher said, sighing. Right. He stood up and walked to the front of the class, paying careful attention not to walk oddly or garner any more bad attention. When he finally stood in front of the class, he had to fight the urge to hide out of embarrassment. I think I'll be going to Aoba, he mumbled. Though no one said it, he could hear the collective "oh" that rang out in everyone's mind. He had been obsessed with hero schools for so long, but now he was changing his tune. Like the general school? His teacher asked. He only nodded in response, too afraid to say anything, and his teacher only responded with, I see. He walked back to his seat and tried not to be unnerved by how quiet everyone was. On the way back, he locked eyes with Bakugo and he could see the fury in his eyes, but he couldn't understand why. School ended like usual, nothing exciting. He grabbed his things and tried to get out of class as soon as he could, but a very hot hand gripped his shoulder. Wait. He couldn't understand why Bakugo had said it so bitterly, but he obliged regardless. As his classmates slowly left the room, all that was left was the afternoon sun and a burning silence between the two. Bakugo Why aren't you going to Udade UFING? He turned around and looked at the blonde incredulously. Huh? You heard me, dipshit. Aren't you the one who beat hero schools out of me for the last 10 FING years? But you never listened until today, he roared. He was so loud he stunned Izuku into silence. You've been acting weird for FING weeks and then you show up with a quirk. It's not . Don't FING lie to me. Bakugo's hand gripped Izuku's throat tight enough to keep him from being unable to breathe completely but still struggling for air. How long have you been hiding it, huh? I didn't . His sentence was cut off as the hand around his throat tightened. Put me down and I'll tell you, he said, gasping for air. Bakugo let go abruptly and Izuku fell to the ground heaving. For a few months. You expect me to believe that? I don't care what you think, it's the truth, the Granette said angrily. We aren't even friends anymore, I have no reason to lie to you. For a split second, something flashed across Bakugo's face. Something akin to guilt. Izuku brushed it off as a trick of the light, but something in his chest felt unsettled. What's it do? Why would I ? He didn't dare finish the sentence when he heard Bakugo start growling. I'm still figuring it out, he sighed. The blonde didn't say anything and so they sat in awkward silence for what felt like hours. Izuku felt horribly uncomfortable as Bakugo glared daggers into him and he looked everywhere but those fiery red eyes. I better see you at the FING entrance exams, he grumbled. The blonde grabbed his bag and slung it over his shoulders and left like there was a fire somewhere. Wait. Bakugo - but the blonde didn't turn around not once. Now he was the one left with a million questions. It's so weird, he groaned. He sat up from the desk and continued his rant. First he tells me to give up and now that I am he wants me to start all over again. Maybe he likes you? What? You know boys are mean to the girls they . First, he said with a breath. I'm not a girl. If you believe that, she shrugged. What does that even mean? He screamed. His friend, the jury was still out on that, gave no response and went back to logging the new books the library just received from a donation drive. He knew she was FING with him, but he couldn't help himself from getting frustrated. You don't have to stare holes into me. Then be serious, the Granette mumbled. Fine. She massaged her temple and sighed exasperatedly. Maybe he still sees you as an enemy? When Izuku gave her a look of confusion, she continued. No one would bully someone with no quirk to not apply to a hero school. You had no chance, respectfully, before so maybe he wants to prove he's better than you. He supposed that made sense. He never understood why Bakugo was so adamant about him giving up his dreams when they were unrealistic from the start, but shouldn't this make him happy? Are you gonna apply? His friend asked, bringing him out of his stupor. Maybe, he said. When Haim gave him a look, he replied with, probably. That's more like it. Kick his butt if you can. You're so vulgar. And you're a baby. I will set you on fire. Before their bickering could go any further, the library building started shaking uncontrollably. Is this an earthquake? The blonde asked, voice shaking from the tremors. Izuku started to respond, but then he felt something else. A phantom sense he had never quite felt before. He could feel something powerful in the distance. His vision blacked, leaving only the traces and outlines of everything around him until he could see what looked like a pink aura in the distance. He had no way of knowing for sure, but he knew what he was feeling. A spirit. He flung his bag over his shoulders, trying to get any sense of balance he could muster, and ran out the room. Wait! Izuku! She reached out for him, but the tremors grew stronger and she fell over right before she could reach him. He'd have to say sorry to her later. He jumped down from the floor he was on to the ground floor, using the levitating spell to stop him a second before he hit the ground. The adrenaline blocked out anything that was happening, he just knew his body was leading him somewhere he had to go. He ran out of the front door and headed down the side streets, weaving between people that ran away desperately. A lot of people tried to call out to him, but they got drowned out by the sounds of screams and booms that echoed throughout the city. He kept running until he could almost touch the magical energy that called out to him. When he finally came to his senses, he checked his surroundings. He was in Esuha City. There were buildings littered everywhere. The screens on the cracked from what he assumed was the earthquake's doing. It looked like what he imagined a post-apocalyptic Tokyo would be like. There weren't any people around, probably all evacuated, but he could hear voices yelling further in. Probably heroes. Izuku! How many times do I have to tell you not to run with the grimoire in your bag? I'm in it, you know. That's not important, he huffed. He frantically pointed at the sky and yelled. Look! There was a giant phoenix flapping its wings violently in the direction of the city. Its feathers were a brilliant red, cascading into shades of yellow and light green. It would probably be a sight if it wasn't destroying an entire city. That's a who? Sylvie screamed. A what? It's basically a phoenix. They're rarely violent though. Why would it dash? She was cut off as it roared and dipped into the city, knocking buildings off-kilter and causing the ground to tremble again. Actually, that's not important. Just transform, she said hastily. Okay, he said in a panic. He tried to recall the spell she taught him ages ago. Shift shape. He was enveloped in a dazzling light that quickly subsided into his prior-made attire. It was more embarrassing than the first time since he was conscious he looked like a crazy cosplayer. You've been practicing, you'll be fine, just go. I'll figure out a way to seal it. He nodded and ran closer to the bird, the click of his heels grounding him. He used his wind spell to boost himself up to the roof of one of the buildings so he could get a better grasp of the situation. In the distance, he saw what looked like Kamui Woods trying to wrestle the bird from the sky. He weaved his wood after it, but the bird was faster and escaped his attempted lacquer chain prison with ease. Cementos formed a thick wall of concrete from the ground in an attempt to immobilize the bird, but it flew through it and sent rock flying everywhere. Almost like a rain shower. It was kind of pathetic how they couldn't even scratch it. He held out his palm in the direction of the bird and chanted, Astra. A dazzling ball of energy shot out from his hand at the bird. He knew it made impact when the bird screamed. The bird turned its attention to him, looking furious, and flew at him and fast. Izuku scrambled and activated his flight spells and started flying, trying to put as much distance as he could between him and the bird. Surprisingly, he flew about as fast as the bird did and was able to keep a safe distance away from it, but he would be lying if he said it wasn't disorienting. Luckily the long hair from his transformation was tied in pigtails, otherwise, it would be all in his hair. He felt something extremely hot behind him. He glanced behind him and realized it started spewing fire in his direction, something he probably should have thought about in hindsight. He tried to dodge but the flames managed to reach his legs and it hurt. Unable to concentrate, he landed on the roof of a building and made a crater on impact. Sheet, he grimaced. He tried desperately to get up but his ankles hurt badly, they felt sprained. He was also dizzy and couldn't see properly. He tried to force himself to fly away because the bird was hovering above him. Its beak was parted and he could feel the heat of the flames that were about to come out of it. He braced himself for the blast but it never came. All he could hear was a loud thud instead. He opened his eyes and could see the silhouette of MT Lady looking off in the distance. When his vision became slightly more bearable, he saw the bird collapsed over a pile of buildings in the direction MT Lady was looking. He used his flight spells to get off the ground. He still had to seal it, otherwise, it would just keep causing problems. It wasn't like the heroes could keep it under control anyway. When he tried to fly over to it, he felt something snake around his body and stop him. He turned around curious to see who it was and saw the man who broke up his fight with Bakugo some time ago. He was confused for a bit, but then the pieces slowly slotted into place. The scarf, the goggles, the bloodshot eyes. This was Eraserhead. How do you know who I am? He mentally facepalmed, realizing he shouted his identity without thinking. Lucky guess? Aha. He couldn't see his face, but he could hear the disbelief in his voice clear as day. Why isn't my quirk working on you? Oh. This could be a problem. He knew the answer was because magic and quirks were fundamentally different, but he had never seen the two interact with each other before now. He already had Endeavor on him, he didn't need any more bad press. Let me go. No can do, kid. You're a vigilante. The monster is just going to cause more problems. I have to fix it. And how are you going to do that? Izuku could hear the edge in his voice. He felt something in him seize as Eraserhead's quirk got more intense. He couldn't pinpoint what it was exactly, but his body felt unbearably hot. Is this from his quirk interacting with my magic? Hey, kid. His voice was drowned from an explosion of flames from Izuku's body. Eraserhead's scarf was reduced to ash in the explosion. Izuku took a good look at himself and realized he was completely on fire. He felt hot and like he was on the edge of passing out, but he couldn't pinpoint why. He didn't really have time either, since he still had to seal the bird away before any other heroes got in his way. His magic felt markedly different, but he could still feel that same instinct that was there when he used his other powers. He angled his arms behind him and expelled a blast of fire, jetting over to where the spirit laid on the ground unconscious. He overshot the distance a bit because he didn't expect his flames to be so strong and ended up hitting the ground a bit away from it. Luckily, he rolled so it didn't mess up his ankle any more than it already was. Izuku. He looked dizzily in the direction of the voice and saw it was Sylvie. He completely forgot she existed for a minute. Where have you been? He screamed. Sorry. I had to figure out how to seal it. Can't we just do it like the Yukiana? No, this one is a lot different. We'll have to seal it in something until we can take it to the spirit world. She threw what looked like an oversized gold coin at him. If it wasn't for the immediate danger, he would have probably laughed from her small body, clearly throwing something triple her body weight. He caught the coin with his hand, and thankfully it didn't melt from the flames enveloping his body. Some strong butt coin. Quick, hurry! She motioned him over to the body of the bird. It started to stir, signaling it was almost ready for round 2, but Izuku wasn't in any shape or form, so he had to do this fast. Repeat after me, O God of Thunder, destroy devils, subdue my enemies, and drive away evil influences. Receive this command and seal. He repeated her as instructed, and suddenly, everything around them was enveloped in a brilliant white. And then, everything went black. He blinked his eyes blearily and tried to force his body to wake up. He was surrounded by what looked like scrap metal and broken machines. He tried to remember what happened that could have landed him here. The events of yesterday rushed back to him and he sat up in a panic. This was bad. His transformation was down and heroes could be looking for him. He had to get out of wherever the hell he was. You're awake. He turned around so fast it gave him whiplash. He took a defensive stance and readied his magic in case he needed to fight back. He didn't look like a hero, far from it actually. He looked like he was about Izuku's age, but that didn't make him any less dangerous. The mysterious man giggled at Izuku's behavior. Don't worry, I'm not going to hurt you. I saved you from exhaustion. The heroes almost caught you, you know. The stranger set down a plate of food on the neatest desk he could find and turned towards Izuku. Who are you? Izuku asked. I'm Aoyama. But you can call me Aphrodite. Chapter 7. Wait, Izuku says hurriedly. You're who now? Aphrodite. He says it like it's the most reasonable thing in the world, and to him, Izuku supposes it as though Izuku can't shake the feeling he's been punked. Clearly I didn't hear you right, he says with a breath. Did you just say, Aphrodite? I can sound it out, Aoyama says. When Izuku gives no response he starts, Aphrodite. Wait. He holds his hand up at him, gesturing him to stop while Izuku dry heaves from the overload of information he's just gotten from the past 2 seconds. But Aphrodite is a woman. Aoyama stares at him with those big sparkly eyes and laughs. Gods don't really have any gender. Izuku stares yet again and Aoyama continues with a sigh. We're not really male or female, we just take the appearance of them because we have to blend in with humans. So you're like actually Aphrodite? Izuku asks hesitantly. Not the original one, no. When the greenette looks even more bewildered, Aoyama sighs and continues, I'm her successor. He flips his hair in a faux grandiose gesture and strikes a pose. Dazzling, no? Yeah, you rum something. Izuku has to push down the urge to shiver at how Aoyama's eyes twinkle and his weird gestures. Would there ever be a normal blonde in his life? You offend me, Mon-ami, he says with faux hurt. Sorry. First time meeting a god. A big one at that. Well, I will no doubt be the brightest dash. And before the blonde could start on another narcissistic tangent, Izuku asked, how do gods choose successors? Well, it's complicated, Aoyama says. He pauses, collecting his thoughts in a way that made sense, and continued, gods can pass on their title, power, and name to any being. It could be to another god, a spirit, or even a human like I used to be. Wait, you used to be human, he says in disbelief. Aoyama responds with a wink and Izuku's head runs rampant with dozens of questions, namely, wait, so what sort of powers does Aphrodite have? Well, I can't tell you everything, the pretty must keep their secrets. The blonde looks at Izuku expecting some sort of admiration, but all he gets is a dead expression in return. Humans always seem to be a tough crowd. Well, you have used one of mine already. Izuku thought back to the spells he used in the past few weeks. What sort of spell could he have used that was Aphrodite's? When he couldn't come up with an answer, Aoyama answered for him. It was shift shape, Aoyama said deflated. Oh. I thought that was a fairy spell. Well it is now, he says matter-of-factly. Izuku looks at him with those big doe eyes again, curiosity almost blinding him, and he elaborates. I taught that one to them decades ago in exchange for some fairy powder. It goes great on top of a croissant. For some reason, Izuku had this expectation that gods would be more serious beings. The one, allegedly, standing 3 feet away from him shattered every expectation he had in the span of a few minutes. He thought he'd accommodated his new lifestyle and developed a healthy dose of take everything at face value, but crazy was, well, crazy. Changing the subject before he got a migraine, he asked, wait, so where are we? The way Aoyama acted, he doubted he'd even step foot in such a place, but here they were surrounded by hunks of scrap metal. Doesn't really seem your style. No offense. None taken, he said with a wide smile. This is my friend's lab. I help her decorate and design her tech. He placed his hand under his chin and his expression changed to that of one in deep thought. Actually, she was the one who asked me to find you, so I should probably take you to her now that she's awake. With the strength of practically 10 men, Aoyama yanked Izuku out of the room and led him down the hall directly outside the room. He was a bit surprised by how dim everything was. The hall outside the room seemed to be one long endless expanse, stretching further and further into the building, leading to who knows where. The walls were large and looming and seemed to be made out of metal much like everything else here. He peeked into various rooms and saw mounds on mounds of gadgets and circuitry strewn across each room like streamers at a party. He wondered how the place hadn't blown up yet. His thoughts were interrupted as his body collided with Aoyama's. He looked up at the back of his head, staring curiously, and then realized they had finally reached their destination. He peeked from behind the god's shoulders and saw a room much more open than the rest. There were windows nearly as big as the wall adorning every corner of it and workstations everywhere. At one in the center sat a girl with pink hair. Handsome dash. Before Aoyama could even get the sentence out, she came barreling at them like a bullet train. So fast that Izuku had to wonder if she had a speed quirk. She lifted the steampunk goggles over her face and her eyes vaguely looked like scope lenses. As she stared at him, they seemed to enlarge and he had the feeling she was analyzing him a little too deeply. So you're this Venus everyone has been talking about. She extended her gloved hand toward him with enough energy to startle him. I'm handsome May, but you can just call me May. Izuku paled. He had been a vigilante for only a few weeks and his cover was already blown. He started spiraling, questions of his future circling his mind like crows. Breathe, she said gingerly, surprisingly gentle. I'm not going to rat you out to the police. I'm an all, she said out of excitement. Her statement gave Izuku a bit of relief, not much but enough for the color in his cheeks to return to him. If she was going to keep his secret, he supposed she wasn't doing it for no reason, which led him to his next question. Mind telling me what I'm doing here then? Well, my little cosplayer, she said teasingly. This is my lab. She gestured towards the huge room they were standing in. She turned her attention back to the greenette and gave him a smile that sent shivers down his spine. And in this very lab, I'm going to make you some gear. He tilted his head to the side in confusion and then looked up at Aoyama, who seemed to be the, surprisingly, more sensible one here. Aoyama giggled at his face and took the liberty of stepping in. She's practicing to get into the support course at U.A. She needs a test subject so she can work on her inventions before the entrance exams. But why me? He asked out of genuine confusion. He supposed he wasn't exactly opposed to the thought of gear, more excited than anything, but he couldn't exactly understand where he fit into all her schemes. "You're like the most famous vigilante right now," she yelled. "All of Japan is trying to figure you out right now." She looked down at her wrist, typing and pressing things on what looked like a smartwatch. After some time, a screen appeared out of nowhere in the center of the room. It was a clip of him sealing away with the corrupted spirit he had been fighting only hours ago. He looked half dead by the end of it, and he was sure no citizens were around, so who would have recorded it? He diverted his attention from the video playing on loop and peeked at the text beside it. His face paled for the second today once he realized what it was. "I'm trending," he said, voice chock full of disbelief. "Yes. Everyone loves how cute you look and the fact that you have more than one quirk." Izuku couldn't hide the flinch that racked his body at the comment. This was getting dangerous. "You were even on the national news." He turned his attention to the video playback again, but the sound didn't reach his ears. He was all over the news. This was supposed to be a subtle gig, not all over the news. "Izuku," Aoyama called. He placed his hand on Izuku's forehead and frowned. "You don't look so good." "Because I wasn't supposed to be all over the news," he says, breath becoming more and more labored. "I'm not trying to get caught by the police." Isn't it too late?" Hatsum says, unhelpfully. Might Izuku add. "I mean, you're already a vigilante." Izuku stared at the Hatsum and deadpanned. "You're not helping." "Well, I'm trying to," she huffed. "All you have to do is let me make you a few gadgets." He guessed he would have to worry about the whole trending thing later. Hatsum seemed unwilling to let the whole support gear thing go, and he would like to be back to his house before night if possible. "Like what, Hatsum?" he said with a sigh. He couldn't believe he got his identity exposed and was receiving support tech in the span of a few minutes, but he already hit his limit with Aoyama, so what was wrong with a little more crazy? She zoomed around the room and retrieved all sorts of inventions off of workstations and out little bins scattered all around. She was moving so fast he couldn't see half of it, but he would be lying if he said he wasn't concerned about the volume of tech she was carrying and how it got bigger every second. She finally stopped at the one clear workstation and called them over. It was like watching a child on Christmas. When he and Aoyama finally made their way over, she tossed dozens of inventions on the table. He swore he saw smoke coming from one of them. "First up, we have this comm device." She held up what looked like a black earbud. It looked pretty simple, all things considered. "This way you can radio me whenever you need help with something. It's designed to be used within 3,000 kilometers. Haven't had the chance to use it yet." "Isn't that like all of Japan?" he asked, dumbfounded. "Precisely. If it works like intended, it could beat basically every device on the market. I could extort millions off agencies." Izuku silently thanked the heavens he was on her good side. "It can also be tuned to listen into police and hero scanners." She turned the outer shell of the device like you would a dial, and at first only static came from it until unfamiliar voices reported on what seemed to be a robbery. He couldn't help but be in awe at the device. Granted, it wasn't the most revolutionary thing ever, he was still impressed by it. He felt like one of those spies in movies his mother often forced him to watch with her. This continued for some time. Hatsum showing them various inventions and Izuku and Aoyama deciding whether or not they would be useful. Seeing as he had magic, half of what she gave him wouldn't be necessary, but he would try it out if it meant her keeping her word. Without him even knowing it, morning transitioned into sundown, and the room is filled with orangish gold hues. "Hatsum," Aoyama said gently. "It's almost nighttime. Don't you think we should let our little vigilante go back home?" Hatsum sighs reluctantly but pulls her goggles over her head, signaling that she was done. "Fine. Just let me pack the things I want to give him." She cherry-picked some of the gadgets on the table, some she showed him and some she did not, and goes over to a workstation to do who knows what. Midoriya. His attention snaps away from Hatsum and he looks up at Aoyama. "I'm sure you can guess the other reason why I saved you the other day," he says matter-of-factly. Izuku is confused. Truthfully, he can't think of any particular reason for why he's here or why he even entertained this for this long, but something about it felt warm and familiar, so he let it take its course. When he didn't give any response, Aoyama continued, "You were beaten pretty badly the other day. Your training is going nowhere as fast as it should." Izuku could only continue to look in confusion. Granted, he felt somewhat similar. He would much prefer to be further along, but he truly couldn't make any progress with elemental magic. There was too much control he lacked, but why did Aoyama say it was going too slow? Why should it go any faster? Think carefully. Aoyama's tone of voice was very serious, a sharp contrast to how childish he talked and acted earlier. It was much more befitting of his god status, which he was still getting used to. "You're the first mage there is in centuries, and the grimoire you have is one bestowed upon by a god themselves. This time, he fully shifted his gaze to Izuku, and for what felt like the millionth time, Izuku saw something flash in the eyes of another person that held things no one was telling him. Don't you think it's strange? Izuku was stunned into silence. He did think there was something more to it all, but he had been too consumed with actually learning anything to think critically about it. But if he knew something, why wasn't he telling him? Aoyama finished. Hatsum interrupted. She held what looked like an all-black Rubik's Cube in her hand. A blue button rested on the top of it. When you're alone, press the button on this bad boy, and all the gadgets I wanted to give you will come out of it. He took it out of her hands with a quiet, thank you, and stared at it quietly. Ah, Hatsum said, tapping her fingers against the metal table. Am I interrupting something? Not at all. We just had a little chat, Aoyama said. Izuku smiled and nodded, but he had the feeling it didn't look too believable. He tugged Izuku by the arm and motioned his head in the direction of the exit. I'll escort him home. They said their goodbyes and Aoyama walked him over to the exit. Hatsum went back to another workstation, too preoccupied with what she was doing before to see him off. Aoyama snapped his fingers and his yellow All Might bag appeared out of thin air. In the midst of everything, he forgot all about his grimoire and Sylvie, who was probably worried sick. Do me a favor. Don't tell your guide about having met me, at least for now. And clear your schedule on Thursday, I have something to show you. Before he could respond, the god snapped his fingers again and his vision blurred. The lab turned into a mess of blue colors, and the next thing he knew, he was in his room. He collapsed onto his bed, disoriented from being teleported so abruptly. The only thing he could think was, what just happened? Thursday arrived and Izuku was feeling a mix of emotions he couldn't quite place. Well, everything but the nerves. He wasn't sure what was in store for his meeting with Aoyama. He said he was going to show him something, but he wasn't sure if he should be excited or nervous. He also didn't tell Sylvie about his meeting with him. He was confused as to why but made an excuse as requested. He was sure she could see through but thankfully didn't question it. He put away his things from school and made his way to the address Aoyama mentioned. It was a few blocks away, some abandoned building by a beach. He remembered it being crowded with trash some time ago, but when he passed by it, it was clean as far as the eye could see. He doubted the city organized something to clean it up, so he could only wonder who did. He figured he'd ask around when he had the time, but right now he had more important things to do. When he finally arrived at his destination, it seemed to be an old house. It felt strangely out of place considering where it was, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He knocked a couple of times, unsure of whether to just waltz in or if he even had the right place. After a bit of silence, he elected to just open the door himself to see if there were any clues inside, but the inside was wildly different from what he could have imagined. It was a gorgeous little place. It felt antiquated in the way vintage stores do. There were so many miscellaneous items strewn about, and corny as it may sound, it felt magical. When he came to his senses, he noticed blonde hair through a hallway he was just now seeing. He made his way through and was surprised again to see a living area that felt huge, betraying the outside of the house yet again. My, I was wondering when you'd get here, Aoyama said. He sipped some fragrant tea and gave Izuku the biggest smirk from the chair he sat in. Did all gods act so childish? You could have explained this place better, you know, he huffed. He took a seat on some couch close by and folded his arms. That'd ruin the first lesson, you see. He stood from his chair and clapped his hands together the way performers did before their next act. That was glamour, magic mon ami. Glamour? He would be lying if he said he wasn't interested now. It's a specialty of Aphrodite. We can make things simply appear as they aren't. This house may look abandoned from the outside, but the inside is gorgeous, isn't it? He had to admit that it was. It was cozy and warm. A bit far from what he would have expected from Aoyama, but beautiful in its own way. He felt a finger on the tip of his nose and Aoyama looking at him with slanted eyes. You're thinking something rude, no? This house is from my predecessor. That made more sense. He still couldn't get around this whole successorship to godhood though. Assuming he was telling the truth, that is. So why am I here? He asked. I'm here to help you make a little progress with your magic. It should only take a few seconds. The blonde put his hands around Izuku's head and closed his eyes. Meanwhile, Izuku was trying not to feel uncomfortable while he did who knows what. Izuku felt nothing at first, but then his brain felt weird. It felt like the onslaught of a headache and was starting to hurt bad. Hey! Wait, he tried to plead. He felt the grip around his head tighten and Aoyama muttered something about not agreeing with their methods. What was he talking about and what the hell was going on? Aoyama. He was ignored yet again and his headache felt like it reached its peak. He saw flashes of colors fly by, much like when he first acquired his magic, and voices that sounded distinctly like theirs, only he didn't recall the conversations. What was this? I'm sorry, Izuku. And then everything faded to black. When he awoke, he felt like he had been hit by a truck. It took a minute, but the events that happened a while ago came back to him and he sat up in alarm. He scanned the room until he found the culprit for his suffering, sipping tea again and reading some book like nothing happened. What the F was that? He asked incredulously. His anger only grew when the god showed no sign of emotion, only continuing to go about his day like Izuku wasn't even there. The blonde sighed and focused his attention on Izuku. I can't tell you, more like I'm not allowed to, but I activated some of your powers. Aoyama gestured toward a painting on the wall and said, try them. Izuku wasn't sure what exactly he was supposed to try. He still felt normal, and he couldn't figure out for the life of him why Aoyama was so cryptic. He remembered the small little lesson on glamour magic he had gotten earlier. Was that it? Just focus. What do you want the painting to be, Izuku? What can it be? Izuku raised his hand, preparing to cast his magic, and some part of it felt instinctive. His hand moved on its own, a quick swipe to the right, and the painting erupted into butterflies fluttering about the room. What dash? He stopped mid-sentence and stared at his hand and then at Aoyama. What was that? If you want to know, then you have to get stronger, Izuku. His tone was deathly serious and Izuku felt an unfamiliar chill shiver down his spine. You don't have much time left. And there it was again. That cryptic way of speaking that made him painfully aware of how unaware he was. What was he missing? Why couldn't they tell him? How? His voice broke and he was on the verge of tears this time, but bit them back for the sake of his pride. Find him. Aoyama waved his hand in the air and Izuku's vision quickly warped. Wait! He called out. He tried to outstretch his hand and grasp onto him, but by the time he got close enough, he was in an unfamiliar place, screams littering the air and fiery buildings cascading his vision. Sheet! He found himself moving his hands before he could process it. He realized he applied the transformation magic he'd learned some time ago without saying the spell. It seemed he didn't need to say them out loud anymore, which gave him infinitely more questions, but now wasn't the time. He quickly tried to grasp the situation at hand. There was fire everywhere, but he saw nothing in the air indicating it was a phoenix or whatever the last spirit was called. That made him relieved because a giant bird wasn't exactly something he wanted to face again. He only hoped that this fire spirit was a little less malevolent. Though the way the screams sounded, he doubted it. First, I should put out the fires. He took to the air, flying high above all the buildings, and let down a rain spell he learned from his spellbook, Cumulonimbus. In the blink of an eye, heavy rain fell from the sky and thunder filled the air, mixing with the screams of civilians. Fighting in the rain was far from ideal, but he had to get vision of the enemy he was fighting. He scanned the dimming buildings and spotted a glowing area somewhere nearby. Surely that was his target. He flew over, taking care not to be spotted, and hid in some alleyway a small distance away from the spirit. This time it looked to be an extremely muscular man with fiery red hair and 4 arms. He was sure this was something he'd seen in his history classes before, but the name escaped him now that he stood within 20 feet of it. He was broken out of his thoughts when he spotted a woman being held by the neck in one of his arms. His body went up in the most brilliant of flames and his maniacal laughter filled the air. Izuku had to close his eyes for fear of going blind, and when he opened them he was overcome with shock. The woman was severely burned from the neck up to the point she was unrecognizable. He tried hard to repress his disgust, but he was upset he ended up vomiting. He leaned onto the wall for support and tried so desperately to get himself together. He had to fight him, but his body wouldn't listen to him. Little mage, the spirit said. It was the type of boisterous cheer you'd hear from a drunk man at a bar. It was chilling for Izuku, considering he just said his first dead body mere minutes ago. He hadn't even known the spirit knew he was here. I know you are here. Why don't you come out and fight me, eh? His accent was so thick, much like a Russian. Izuku could hear the excitement in his voice and covered his mouth in desperation, trying to silence his dry heaves so he wouldn't be caught. Found you, the spirit whispered. He appeared directly before Izuku and reared his left hand for a punch. Izuku quickly rolled out of the way, causing the spirit's fist to narrowly miss his face and instead hit the building behind him. The building turned to debris in a mere second and Izuku panicked, quickly flying so that he could get away from the spirit. The man let out another laugh that sent shivers down Izuku's spine. Fast one. That was almost your life there. The spirit turned his gaze towards Izuku and said, I'm Akuma. Tell me, what is your name, little mage? Izuku couldn't get out the words to answer him and the displeasure on the spirit's face was evident. I am Izuku, he stumbled out, too afraid to meet Akuma's eyes. Tell me, Izuku, were you the one who released me from that little brat? If so, I thank you. I feel better than ever. The spirit flexed his muscles and laughed loudly. I didn't do that, sir, Izuku forced out. Eh? So you're the one responsible for this bothersome rain. Akuma cracked his knuckles ominously and grinned. No matter. The man erupted into flames again, but this time they were blue and Izuku could feel the searing heat from here. He felt a rush of heat coming towards him, and he quickly sidestepped, barely missing a wall of flame. The building it hit got set ablaze. The flames hungrily liked the air as if the rain didn't exist, steadily growing stronger. He looked back at the spirit, fear riddling him like a disease. What was he up against? He felt another blast of fire and this time he tried to defend himself. He used earth magic to manipulate the asphalt to act as a shield against the flames, and it sort of worked. The asphalt melted like putty and it was clear he was going to have to work a little harder to beat this spirit. He had just never met one so malevolent. Too slow, Akuma whispered again before a swift punch connected to Izuku's abdomen and sent him flying down the street. Izuku screamed and sked in a breath. Something definitely broke. He could barely breathe from the pain. He tried to stand up, but his legs gave out before he could even get on his knees. You're a weak one, eh? Izuku raised his head to see the spirit towering above him. I thought maybe humans had gotten stronger since the last time I fought one. He had to do something. He was going to die. His body wouldn't listen and he was afraid. He wasn't strong enough. He quickly racked his brain for something to do, anything. He couldn't win in a fight so he had to play underhanded, but how? He was shaken out of his thoughts when he felt a fist grip his neck. He struggled for air in the fire spirit's iron grip, using his hands to claw against the fists pathetically. Please. Anybody, he begged. He felt the heat rising in the spirit's hand and became erratic. This couldn't be the end. He had so much to do. He just got his powers. He wanted to go to hero school. He wanted to become a pro. He wanted to master his magic. This couldn't be it. His prayers were answered in the form of a flying kick to his captor's face. The spirit flew like a bullet through the office buildings behind them, and Izuku silently sent a prayer to whatever god sent a pro-hero his way. You alright, kid? A voice said to him. They outstretched a gloved hand towards him and his eyes traced the hand up to its owner's face. Mirko, he breathed. She let out the biggest grin and helped him up. Surprised you know me, kid, not many can recognize me that fast. She scoured the surroundings and turned back to him. Seems like you need a little help defeating this thing. I'm sorry, he choked. There's no time for that. Right now, we have to subdue him before we run out of time. She used her thumb to signal behind her, and he saw the buildings awash in his blue flame. He was supposed to be handling this. I'll keep him busy. You support from the background, yeah? He nodded silently. He had no choice but to help. He had to seal it after all. They quickly turned their attention toward the sound of shifting debris coming from the hole in the building in front of them. The spirit emerged, grinning from ear to ear. Bunny Rabbit. You fight well, he said laughing. I bet I could kick your butt even better, she said. She crouched down, readying herself for a fight. Try me, he said. She jumped so fast that she turned into a blur of white, and her kick was countered by his punch. She quickly followed up with another and they continued like this, exchanging blows, each successive hit shaking the earth around them more and more. He put his hands to the earth and channeled his magic into it. Duck! She quickly backstepped and flipped away, causing Akuma's next hit to overextend himself and throw him off balance. Izuku took advantage of this opening and used the ground to blow him back. It sent him flying much like Mirko did earlier, only this time, towards Izuku. He manipulated the earth again and the ground shot out from underneath the flying spirit, sending him skyward. He followed up with another elemental spell he learned, Thunder. He heard the sky crackle before lightning came down from the heavens, striking him in midair. The spirit crashed into the ground once again, but this time, his anger was palpable. The blue flames on him grew stronger and his eyes turned white. He turned his gaze toward Izuku and before the greenette could process it, the man was on him in an instant, sending him flying back much as they did to him minutes ago. The force of this one was much stronger and caused Izuku to cough up blood from the impact. Mirko jumped in, trying to stop him from attacking Izuku again. She did a sick kick in midair, but before it connected he grabbed her leg and flung her like a rag doll. She shifted her weight so she could land in a crouching position before jumping at him again, this time her leg outstretched to hit him with a crescent kick. Akuma reacted again by trying to stop it in midair, but she altered her foot's position at the last second and made impact with his cheek. His neck cracked so hard it sounded like thunder and Izuku rushed again to use earth magic, sending a pillar through the spirit's abdomen. It pierced it only slightly, but it was enough to take advantage of. Izuku chanted and the diameter of the pillar grew and stretched the hole. It caught Akuma off guard and he coughed up blood and heaved. He took his fist and broke the pillar from its base and flung it somewhere. He raised his hand and shot out flames at Izuku, but this time the boy rolled out of the way. The blast was thinner and less intense. Akuma was Weakening. Mirko ran him down with kicks again, but this time her attacks were light and quicker than his, and she was able to land hit after hit since he wasn't able to keep up. She bent her leg towards the sky and her foot came crashing down on his head, and his body cratered on impact. Kid! Do your stuff. Izuku concentrated and formed chains from the ground. He was far from incapacitated, but all he needed was a little window to seal him away. Akuma roared and struggled to break the chains that held him down. Izuku steadied himself and chanted the one spell that had been drilled into him time and time again. Exilium. And in a flash of white, the spirit disappeared and he thanked God that it was over. He saw a shadow fall over him and he turned around to Mirko. He was about to thank her before he felt a swift kick to his head and the world just fade to black. When he came to, he was in a room with gray walls and a ceiling. Only a door decorated the room, and in his confusion, he wondered where he was until it hit him. He had been captured. Think. He felt his body to make sure he was still transformed, and let out a sigh of relief when he found the long hair that wasn't his real hair. He hadn't been revealed yet, but who knows what would happen the longer he stayed here. He finally noticed the chains connected to his hands and thought that he could break them, but he didn't exactly want to make a commotion and he had to fight his way out of the police station. He would prefer to sneak out if possible, but he had to be quick. How could he do it? He didn't get to turn over the question long before the sound of a key and knob turning put him on alert. He nearly snapped his neck with how fast he turned toward the door. It opened to reveal a scruffy, older man with black hair and a plain-looking man who was dressed like a detective flanked by some officers. The officers unhooked his cuffs from the wall and escorted him to what he believed to be an interrogation room. It had nothing but a desk and a large mirror on the far wall. He had seen it on TV multiple times, but to be in one himself felt surreal. He was forced into his seat roughly by the guards, and the detective and man, he still wasn't sure who he was, sat opposite to him. Hello. I'm Tsukachi Naomasa, and this is my partner Aizawa. The black-haired men simply nodded while the detective continued. We'd like to ask you some questions about the attack last night, he said smiling. Izuku gulped and nodded, and Tsukachi wasted no time entering into questioning. He pulled out some photos from a manila folder and showed them to Izuku. They were of the spirit last night, Akuma. Do you know who this man is? He said his name was Akuma, Izuku answered. Are you affiliated with this Akuma? Ms., he trailed off, asking for his name indirectly. Izumi. It was half-butted, but it was something to keep his name hidden. He saw the detective twitch, but continued, I do not know him personally. Do you have any idea why he was attacking the city? Not yet. Yet, the detective asked inquisitively. He paused and thought about it. What was he really doing with this spirit situation? Investigating didn't feel exactly wrong but not right either. He was more so defeating them, but he hadn't made much progress in finding out their origins. Aoyama just gave him the biggest clue of a lifetime, but he hadn't had much time to figure it out. Working on it. Tsukachi raised an eyebrow, but Izuku didn't elaborate and he didn't press it. Can you tell us why he disappeared? I defeated him. Defeated criminals don't disappear in thin air, Ms. Izumi. You did something to him. He slid out another photo, this one a bit more blurry than the rest of what looked like Izuku praying over his body. You did something, and he was gone the next second. The two men looked at him expectantly, but Izuku wouldn't answer. Couldn't. Trying to tell them about magic wouldn't blow over well and this was all confidential anyway. Care to answer? The man, Aizawa, asked. His tone was slightly on edge, a hint of anger underneath all that apathy. I can't. You're in no position to be withholding information. Izuku remained silent and he could feel the anger reverberating off Aizawa in waves. Tsukachi placed a hand on his shoulder to placate him and continued with his questioning. He pulled out more photos, this time of people. Dead people. The bodies looked so horrific that he almost vomited again. Their bodies looked like they had the life sucked out of them. Ashen gray and thin as a leaf. What happened to them? He breathed out in horror. We were hoping you knew. No, I've never seen these people before. And it was the truth. The only thing he had been seeing these days were spirits. Whoever these people were, he didn't see how they related to him. Bodies are found at every fight you show up at. All dead and presumed to be struck by some emitter-type quirk. Izuku tried to keep his mouth from falling open from the shock. What could any of this mean? Tsukachi shared a look with Aizawa before sighing. Listen, kid. My quirk says you're telling the truth, about everything but your name at least. We can't arrest you for murder, but you're a vigilante and know something we don't. Tsukachi leaned in and stared Izuku dead in the face. You either come clean or make your way to Tartarus. Izuku stilled. That was one of the highest security prisons in the country, no, continent. These crimes couldn't be serious enough to send him there. He found himself questioning his situation for the 100th time at that moment, struggling to figure out what was happening. What will you do? Izuku pondered, and as much as he would like to share the details, this was his battle and his battle alone. It was too risky to reveal magic to other people. He didn't know the consequences. He was already an enemy of the law, but with what he was about to do, he would be considered a real criminal. I'm sorry. Aizawa shot up, his eyes blood-red and hair defying gravity, and it was then Izuku realized who this was, Eraserhead. He wasn't sure what effects Quirk would have on magic, but there was no time like the present. He channeled his magic and the room vibrated before the ground erupted underneath him, breaking the chains on his cuffs and piercing the ceiling. The hole caused the roof to become unstable and Izuku had to shield himself as it collapsed, debris flying everywhere. Aizawa was alarmed. His quirk was aimed directly at him and it wasn't working. Unaffected, Izuku jumped on the table and propelled himself with the use of a quirk? Aizawa wasn't sure. Did this girl have multiple quirks? Aizawa felt around his neck for his rope, but let out a curse under his breath when he realized he left it for repairs with the support course. There were no other heroes here either. Izuku locked eyes with him and he could see the anger in Aizawa's eyes, but it had to be done. He still had a mission to do. He flew away faster than he ever had and made his way home. He had a million more questions after the past 2 days, and it was time to get some answers. He had to get information, that was the only thing he knew for certain. Dead bodies certainly weren't on his radar before the event days prior, but now he was struggling to put together the dots because something was happening right under his nose. He gave Sylvie the rundown on what the police had told him and she was surprisingly mute. He didn't want to press her, she felt like a friend and he could clearly tell there was something she didn't want to say, but this was urgent so he just opted to ask Adela. Usually, he'd teleport but he decided to walk so he could gather his thoughts as he did. A spirit had told him they only became visible when they were angry or when they wanted to be seen, but the Akuma spirit seemed happy and said he was freed. That was very different from what he knew to be true about spirits, and how they manifested, so what was he getting wrong? Before he knew it, the sounds of the urban city faded away and he was at the barrier into the fairy realm, out of breath and tired. Maybe he should have taken a portal. He entered and as usual, it was beautiful. Glittering lights among the woodlands and fairies milling about doing whatever they did. He realized he had never asked what spirits did, he just knew they taught him some magic occasionally, and as much as he was curious, that thought would have to wait. Venturing further into the grove of trees, he finds Adela at her usual spot talking to some other fairies. When she catches sight of him, she waved them away and makes her way toward him. Izuku, what can I do for you? The other day you were attacked by a fire spirit and it told me something I was curious about. She beckoned for him to continue and he quickly rambled about the events from the attack the other day. While doing so, he made sure to pay extra attention to her face. Sounds like you almost didn't make it. Are you alright? And that was a question he hadn't really asked himself if he was honest. He knew messing with spirits was dangerous business, but the Akuma was more than he bargained for. If Mirko hadn't been there, then... Izuku, she said gently. Breathe. He let out a gasp of air he hadn't realized he was holding and clutched his chest in fear. He thought he had gotten strong enough to at least stand his ground, but that was not the case. He had even gotten arrested. He noticed a green miasma permeating the air and looked over at Adela, who was casting the spell. It's a mood-stabilizing spell. Something we often use on our young. He nodded, thankful for her concern, and breathed it in. Surprisingly, it worked wonders. Now what were you curious about specifically? I was told that spirits could be visible whenever they wanted, but the Akuma said he was freed. She let out a heavy sigh, clearly not wanting to talk about the matter, but she did so reluctantly. Well, some spirits are banned from materializing the human world. Spirit world? The human world and spirit world are separated by a barrier, so to speak. While we can interact with your world, we still have our own separate from yours. And are spirits born there? He asked. His head was running wild with questions about all this mythology being thrown at him. Well, it depends. Most spirits are born out of human imagination, some however are offspring of said spirits who don't reside in the human world anymore. But why was he freed? That, she paused, turning over what she knew in her head. Izuku was a bit amazed that she, leader of a group of spirits, seemed stupefied by this too. At most, a spirit can interact with humans directly or make themselves visible, however, a spirit can never use their full power like the spirits you're fighting. Well, yokai in your case. And he paused for a moment to take the information in. The spirits roaming free, the dead bodies turning up in the disasters he had left behind. It was starting to make sense and was a bit darker than what he signed up for. Is someone killing quirk holders? He asked softly, his stomach turning at the thought. Killing a human wouldn't just release their quirk Izuku. Something otherworldly, like you, is doing something to them, and spirits are being set free in the process, she said with a sigh. Izuku stood there silently, staring at the ground in shock. While he was taking a magic class, something was going around committing murder right under his nose. It made him feel sick. After the other day, he knew he wasn't nearly as strong as he needed to be and he had no idea what he was up against. Was it another mage or something more? He had met a god so it wasn't far-fetched, but the thought of it being something immensely stronger than what he was already up against made him falter. Izuku — Don't, he responded. His voice sounded a little hoarse, but he didn't care. He knew the fairy just wanted to comfort him but he didn't want it right now. Just answer my last question, am I not human anymore? You still are but your body is changing. Once your magic power reaches its peak then — Thanks, he took the opportunity to storm away from her, hot tears falling from his face in waves. Izuku, wait, she called. He turned around abruptly and yelled, don't you think this is stuff you should be telling me? He wiped the tears from his eyes and continued, oh, you're not human anymore, no big deal. How could you not tell me that? And I know you knew something more was going on with the other spirits, yokai, whatever. Why didn't you tell me? I really am sorry, Izuku. There's only so much we can tell you. There's something, even bigger than gods at play. Please forgive me. And he wanted to, but his emotions couldn't rein themselves in, and he had no choice but to storm away. Midoriya. My little lab rat, I mean partner. How can I help you, the genius, albeit insane, inventor asked him. I need you to hack into the police database. May paused for a second, shocked that someone like him would ask her that with full seriousness, but she was never one to say no to less than legal activities. You got it, little man. Or girl, whatever your thing is. Hey! I'm just being inclusive, she said with a snicker. Her joking facade didn't last long. In seconds, she had gone silent and the air was filled with the furious clicks that echoed from her laptop keyboard. What exactly do you need me to find? Dead persons reported in the last month. Preferably on the days I did vigilante work, he answered back. Ooh, spicy. What's the connection there? She asked offhandedly. Not entirely sure, but that's what I'm here to find out. She didn't respond verbally, but he knew she had heard him. It would be hard to miss the way her typing got faster at the little nugget of information. It went on like this for the better part of 30 minutes before the typing stopped and he heard her say, I'm in. He made his way to her side of the desk they were currently sitting at in the large workroom and peered over her shoulder at his computer. She had multiple reports open in different tabs from the look of it. At the top, he could see the latest victim, M. Fujiwara. It was a picture of a girl barely older than him, likely about to go to high school just like him, and in big, bold text further down the file, it read, Quirk, Pyrokinesis. He already knew that this would be the case, but he felt something in his chest flutter at the confirmation. He knew there was something greater at work, hard to believe it was murder though. Are there any pictures of their bodies? There are. He could hear the hesitation in her voice and he grit his teeth in frustration. It wasn't her fault, but he was tired of people keeping things from him. It's clear people around him knew more than they let on, but what was it that kept them silent? Show me. Izuku. It's bad. I'm not trying to stop you but this is gruesome, she said gently. She slid the goggles off her head and looked at him eye to eye. You won't be able to unsee it. It's fine. Or, going to be at least, but I have to know what I'm up against. She sighed and clicked through some other tabs before hesitating, finger hovering just above the mouse button. He could see it shake a bit and knew that she wasn't exaggerating, and maybe it was just his anger that possessed him to keep going, but he felt he had to see it. He nodded at her to continue, and she pressed the mouse button. And what greeted him was a horror beyond his imagination. Their bodies were black and blue and shriveled up like they had been starved for days. The most striking feature of their bodies had been their eyes, milky white and open almost in terror. He had to repress the bile that rose in his throat, threatening to spill what little breakfast he had this morning all over May's lab. It left a poor taste in his mouth, and the pictures left an even worse impression in his brain. Oh my God, was all he could utter. May nodded in agreement, shocked, but not nearly as much as he was. He had to wonder how terrible her first impression was if he was this bad. It looks like the work of an emitter quirk if anything. Rapid aging, bruising, who knows what else it was doing to them, May said with a grim voice. It doesn't seem like this has ever happened before and they started showing up around the same time whatever those things you fight do. And from the look of their quirks, it's related. I agree. He paused, taking in a breath for his sanity, and continued, I think whoever it is doing this is directly the cause of monsters appearing, but I have to find out who it is, to do that. Any ideas? I have someone I could ask, but if he doesn't know then I'll have to get a little grittier to find it, he said with a grimace. Have you spoken to Aoyama lately? He knew it probably felt random, but the truth was Aoyama was his only hope for getting the answer. He had been radio silent ever since that little stunt, and he wasn't sure if he could disclose his true nature without putting Mei in danger. I tried calling him today since I needed some designs for some new support gear I've been working on, but no response. That didn't give him a good feeling. After what Adela told him, he had some benefactor that was stronger than all of them, considering when he first got his grimoire he was told the user was selected by a god, but Aoyama was one himself. What could be stronger than him? Mei, do me one last favor. She turned and looked at him and he sighed. See if they have any info on where villains frequent. She couldn't mask her look of confusion but obliged quietly. She made quick work of the database this time. The sound of her keystrokes lasted a lot shorter than the first time. There are a couple of places on here, I'll give you a list, but the biggest place seems to be this bar downtown. Real shady place, but nobody has any info on it besides a lot of villains frequenting it. What's your plan? Well, I think it's time for some undercover work, he said with a sly smile. Izuku, what if they jump you? Mei dash. Can you take 10 villains at once? She asked angrily. In a fight? Not funny, she said with a sigh. Well, I for one think I'm hilarious, he said with a huff. Seriously, what are you going to do if it goes wrong? He could hear the fear in her voice, but he would be fine, he hoped at least anyway. Technically, I've never worked against villains, so they probably won't attack me if they recognize me. Besides, it's not like I'm going to waltz in there in full maid cosplay. He had transformed into the girl version of himself but stripped down into more leisure wear. Sweats, a hoodie, and a pair of shades as big as a window. His hair would probably give him away to anybody with a brain, but it was the best chance he had instead of going as a stranger. She grunted but didn't protest any further. The familiar sound of her keystrokes filled the earpiece she had given him a while back. She was going to be his little birdie for the night. You should look for an old dude with white hair, around his 30s. His name is Goru, and he looks to be an informant of some kind. Police haven't cracked down on him for anything specific though. It was a good enough lead for him. He walked up the stairs into the rundown bar, looking around for anyone that could be surveilling him. He felt like he was being watched, but from the looks of it, no one was outside but him. It was probably just the nerves. He continued his trek up the stairs and steeled himself. He could do this, he told himself. It would be all right. He opened the door and immediately felt eyes scan him as he walked in. Their gazes felt like pressure had been applied to his chest. Only when he felt some of the gazes let up did he finally exhale and feel the confidence to move. He looked around the room trying to find the elusive Goru, and there he was at the edge of the bar drinking some brown liquor alone. This was his chance. He sat down next to him and the older man immediately looked him over, before resigning himself to his drink. Your order, an eerie voice asked him. He turned to see a vaguely human-like purple mist in a suit staring back at him with beady yellow eyes. He tried hard to suppress the shiver that went down his spine. I'm, fine thank you. The mist man made his way back to the center of the bar, wiping the same glass he had been before he walked to Izuku. He sat there in silence for a moment, completely unsure about how to even approach a man twice his senior and have a conversation. Izuku, Mei called out in a whisper yell. Say something. So, come here often? The white-haired man erupted into a fit of laughter and he could hear Mei's very audible sigh through the earpiece. He was trying his best here. You trying to hit on me, kid? He asked jokingly. No, sorry. I'm just, really bad with words. Well, you're not the first, he said with another chuckle. The man looked up from his glass and made eye contact with Izuku. But if you purposely made your way over here to me, I presume you're in the business of buying? Izuku internally facepalmed at the oversight. No reasonable informant would give away anything for free, and he was empty-handed. Don't worry. I know you, kid. You give me a piece of information, I give you one. Let's call it a trade, he said, extending his hand. Izuku wasn't sure he had much to offer him, much less any secrets to divulge, but all he needed was one answer and he could try and find the rest from there. Deal, Izuku said, shaking the extended hand. There was a lapse of silence before Izuku assumed he could take the lead in the questioning. There have been corpses popping up with destroyed bodies lately. Do you know who did it? I do, he said, taking a swig of his drink. Izuku stared, expecting more to his answer, but was met with a laugh. Them's the breaks, kid. Got to be more specific. Now it's my turn. Those monsters that you come fight around the city, where do they come from? Izuku turned over the question in his mind, trying to find the best way to dodge it while also giving an answer that made sense. People's quirks. Okay, he said, taking another sip. Your turn. Who is the villain that's been murdering those people? He's about a kid your age. Real dry skin, not too friendly. I call him Hands. It wasn't exactly the answer he wanted, but he wouldn't press for his name. It's not like he could go around town asking about him by using his government name. He assumed he dodged that for a reason. Your quirk? What is it? I don't have one, Izuku said firmly. Lying's not a part of the rules. It's clear you do. Maybe multiple, catch my drift? I'm not lying. Listen, kid. You keep lying and the deal is off, he said seriously. He downed the brown liquor in his glass and gave Izuku his full attention. You got to give me something. Izuku wasn't lying, far from it actually, but what was an answer he could give that would satisfy him? Did it hurt to lie? Izuku, May whispered into his ear. Just tell him you have an energy-type quirk. It's as good as he's gonna get it. Energy-type? Can make a lot of different things, Izuku said coolly. The man looked like he didn't believe it, but it was good enough to keep him from protesting. Why is he doing this? The man stroked his chin, deep in thought. It seemed even he didn't know. He says he needs the energy for a project, not too sure what it means. He turned his gaze back to Izuku. Why re you fighting those monsters? The older man asked. I'm the only one that can. The man laughed at the brunette's response. You're getting better at this. Thanks, Izuku said with a sigh. Where can I find him? The elder looked at him and then behind him. He tried to turn and trace where his gaze went, but the white-haired man hurriedly grabbed his arm, forcefully turning Izuku back to him. Afraid I can't answer that one. Too many risks involved. Where can I meet him then? Hang around in unsavory places for too long, and you'll find him. Trust me, he said with a laugh. He waved his hand, trying to catch the bartender's attention. Kurogiri, check please. Wait. You haven't asked me anything back. Don't need to, kid. He stood up from his bar stool and laid a couple of yen on the counter and fixed his jacket. Word of advice from a villain who's lived this long, sometimes you learn to stop while you're ahead. The older man walked past him, slapping a hand on his shoulder before he left the bar. What now? May asked. And it was as good of a question as any. He had answers, not very good ones, but they were a place to start. Goru told him enough to help Izuku ask around more. The problem was how he would find him, himself. I guess I'm a full-time vigilante now. Sensei, I have new information about that vigilante you've been keeping tabs on. Speak, the villain said, his voice carrying an air of authority with it. She came around the bark asking about your prodigy, today. A hearty laugh resounded throughout the room. It seems he's already found himself a rival.
Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed the video, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.